Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Kid Naruto Has a Thirst of Knowledge. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no time, let's start the story.
Iruka reiterated the fine line of behavior expected of shinobi while Naruto sat in the back of the classroom, ignoring him. Naruto didn't care. Some would claim he was kidding and that his goal was to become their Hokage or a great ninja. Some would argue that he lacked the necessary skill set and would never live up to the high standards. Everyone was mistaken about what they believed the blonde knew, would know, or actually did know. Naruto was himself, not some speculative choice of how the village believed him to be, as they claimed he made his own decisions and plans. A twisted kunai, one of Naruto's gifts that irritates his mood, was in his hand as he sat in the back of the room. He now had another kunai that he was unable to use to practice targets with because of Uchiha, who was a few rows down from him. As he carved swirls into the desk's wood, he thought, oh well. The dull clunk of the wood being carved up repeatedly drew the attention of those on either side of him. When Iruka heard the thunks, he stopped his lecture and looked around to see where they were coming from. When he noticed the resident blonde troublemaker in the class carving into his workstation, he stopped. He called the boy's name and let out a growl. Naruto. When his name was mentioned, the boy looked up, startling Iruka. For an unknown reason he dismissed the idea as he was about to chastise the boy when he was interrupted. The blonde had glanced up at his sensei, waiting for him to say something, but returned to his previous task after deciding it was taking too long. Iruka blinked at the boy, who had just acknowledged him, and then turned away. The boy would have sent a letter of severe retaliation to his parents for his obvious disrespect if he had any. However, he ignored those ideas and made another call. Naruto, since you have so much working knowledge of the subject, why don't you come up here and tell us what this basic seal array for a scroll is designed to do? The boy paused his activity, hung his head, and then let out a sigh. Then, much to the amusement of the class, he stood up, tripped over the bench, and fell. When he reached the floor and was in front of Iruka, he got up and walked down the stairs, making sure his feet were in a perfect line. The blonde stood in front of Iruka, her head bowed, and he shook his head. After extending the chalk, he spoke to Naruto. Naruto, you are to finish the seal array on the board and explain to the class its purpose and its practical use amongst Leaf Village ninja. After glancing at his sensei, Naruto bowed his head once more and glanced at the board before nodding. Iruka pointed to the board, and the boy approached it with his impeccable gait. The blonde started writing and did not stop, leaving the chalk near the board as he wrote something that he shouldn't have known at this level. Tick tick tick, 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 tick. Iruka and the rest of the class were dumbfounded. A lavender-eyed girl sitting in a row a few stairs above Naruto watched him write. She was a little happy that he wasn't scared to stand in front of the class, but she was also sad because he appeared depressed and preoccupied. What was the matter with him? Has something taken place? A few seats up, a girl with pink hair was staring at the board, perplexed. The first section contained all of the answers the sensei had requested, but the remaining sections didn't really address how the seal was used. What was the blonde trying to say? A boy with onyx eyes in the row below her watched the blonde write and quickly lost interest. This was either a joke or something he didn't care about, something the blonde had most likely made up while daydreaming. A boy with a pineapple hairstyle across the row from him was observing the blonde as he wrote out the most intricate and thorough response he had ever witnessed the boy provide during his academy days. After giving his sensei the used piece of chalk, Naruto finished and stepped aside so that everyone else could read the board. From an explosive note to a storage scroll, the seal below contains the fundamentals of each seal array, including the Sandaime, Yandaime, and Toad Sanin Jiraiya. It is common for Chunin and Junin to be so proficient in it that they can replicate it flawlessly when necessary. It is a simple array, but regrettably it has connections to the village's darker fuinjutsu. To those who overlook it, it appears complex, but to those who see it every time they look in the mirror, it resembles a grown man reciting his ABCs and counting to 10 regretfully. This is all that is taught and understood for those at the genin level. To inscribe this array, one needs a steady hand, a moderate amount of chakra cost, and an explanation of the various components that made up the seal. Naruto had drawn a big, blocky capital Q on the board using another piece of chalk, which Iruka saw him do. He then pocketed the chalk, went back to his seat, and picked up his kunai. Iruka glanced at the board before turning back to face Naruto, who had written out the entire lesson the class was supposed to cover without even bragging about his own achievements. Without regret or emotion, the blonde asked the teacher, Naruto, what is this on the board? It's the answer to the question that you all asked me, and the other item is a large Q. But I am sure I don't need to tell a Chunin Academy teacher that. When the bell rang and everyone started packing to leave for home, they all turned to stare at the blonde who had gone to the window, hopped to the tree outside, then collapsed and fled while wearing what few could see as tears in his eyes. Afterwards, with cuts all over his arms and chest, Naruto sat in his apartment rocking back and forth on his shower floor while he spelled out the words. Why, when, where, and who? He moaned and sobbed to himself all the time, watching as his blood gathered and then swirled down the drain. How come there were so many inquiries? Naruto let out a cry as he abruptly stopped and turned to face his hands and arms. Seeing that they were burning red and starting to mend, he reached over to the side, picked up the carving knife, and applied it to the freshly healed flesh of his arms, starting to recut the questions into them. He was crying because there were so many questions. The lavender-eyed girl, who could see what was happening in the 12-year-old boy's house, sat on the ground near the door of the blonde's apartment and wept as she watched him pick up the knife and start the etching and carving again, her chest constricted. She may have saved the young blonde's life when she closed her eyes and screamed at the last thing she saw. After finishing his arms and chest once more in the bathroom, the blonde gazed at the small knife's blade as though it were an unknown object. Then, in his hurry, he carved two large, bold cues into each side of his neck, piercing through the arteries and muscle. His eyes grew heavy as he slid onto his back on the tiled floor, bleeding absurdly fast for a young boy. So many questions, from beyond the darkness of his eyes. He heard the sound of wood smashing and wood being destroyed. Like, what is that sound? Before he heard a powerful yell, he felt two battered and twisted hands pick up his body. The last thing he recalled was, Naruto, don't you dare do this to me, boy. Stay with me, damn it. When Naruto woke up, he was surrounded by white and beeping sounds. He looked around and saw no one, so he thought, hospital. When he attempted to move, he was restrained by thick leather bands. More importantly, why am I here and what should I do now? I wonder where these came from. Naruto felt the telltale tightening in his stomach, which he knew was a sign that his body was demanding answers. However, he took a deep breath and managed to ignore the pressure of the questions that remained unanswered. After a few minutes, he tried to find out where he was in the hospital by looking around, but he changed his mind. After glancing at the straps, he reached for his hospital gown's sleeves. He brought an arm to his face and used his teeth to tear the flesh away, creating a file. He then quickly removed the leather bands after realizing they were fastened to the bed. Taking a scalpel from the tray next to the bed, he rolled up his sleeve, exposing his arm with the pale lines that had formed his previous questions. He then selected a clear piece of skin and etched another question. Why does the pain undershadow the questions? He then raised the scalpel and proceeded to remark all of the older ones on his arms and chest, producing more charcoal for specific types of questions. Red and black for questions about pain, blue in his skin's natural pale for questions over his chakra, and a verdant green for those over his body and mind. He watched as the bloody lines started to heal, and he moved pieces of black and red charcoal across his skin, causing the bloody script to heal to black with red outlining. At last, he entered the tiny bathroom that connected the two rooms and gazed at the hard plexiglass that displayed his two largest pieces to anyone who could see past the white armor collar of his orange jacket. When he looked at himself in a new light, the two bold capital Qs looked back at him. His neck hurt a little, but that was to be expected. His neck tendons popped as he shook his head. He gave them another glance and had an idea. He nodded as he reached into his jacket pockets that hung from the door, took out a small case of black blood-infused ink, and started to create his masterpieces by pulling a needle from the neck of his coat. The seal array that senseis were going over before I showed up here could be placed around these and it would cause them to stay like this, and I would not have to redo them, he said. As the ink blended with his blood to produce the desired effect, he felt the dull pain of the needle burning his skin, but he simply bared his teeth and started over with newfound vigor. Afterwards, a few of Sarutobi's many fears were the devastation of his village and the deaths of everyone he had defended, but now he was running to the room where the blonde had been checked in. When he stopped outside the door, he saw a woman crying and shaking her head, stating that the boy was starting to be released because he had finally lost his soul to the demon. As the man entered, Sarutobi's heart tightened and he opened the door to see a 12-year-old boy sitting on the floor with a bowl of ink in his hand, finishing a swirl he was drawing on the floor. "Hello, Hokage-sama," was a respectful term and tone that the third had never used before, and he flinched when he saw the boy sit up as the Hokage approached the boy and took hold of his shoulders. He pulled down the boy's collar to reveal one of the cues on his neck encircled by the Gogyu Fuin, a very familiar seal structure. Could he have known about this destructive and depressing jutsu from the moment Iruka informed the class that seal jutsu were fully documented in the library and performed it on himself when no one was looking? Hold on. There are still more seals inside. I need to ask him what they do, but I have to be careful. The boy shrugged and looked at the intricate drawing on the ground, attempting to repair the smearing in some areas. "Naruto. How are you, my boy?" He asked. The boy stopped, straightened up, and nodded, avoiding the man. "Naruto, do you know what is on your neck?" he asked, his hospital gown being carried by a strange wind. The elderly man nodded as he approached the boy in front of him and winced at his expression. "Seals Hokage-sama." He looked and saw a snapped file lying in the corner of the room, surrounded by the pool of blood from where he may have gotten the seal ink. His mouth was covered in a rustic metal color that could only be dried blood, and it appeared as though the boy had bitten into his own arm to produce something from it. He was aware of some of it, but he hoped this would help clarify things. "Would you like to tell me what they mean?" With a nod, Naruto pulled a scroll out of the pocket of his regular jacket and showed the man his finished seals and detailed notes, concealing the others. "It is a seal that allows me to use the combined elements of the A-class Fuinjutsu, Fuja Huan, Gogyu Fuin, and the C-class Jutsu Shikoku Fuin. By combining separate elements with my own detailed version of the seal on my stomach, I have created what I call the Hidoi Tamashi Hiwa Shizu Chinmoku Fuin." After giving the boy the impression that he had a question for him, the Hokage gave it some thought as he took the bowl of blood from next to the boy's feet. He grinned and said, "That's a very complex name for something that seems just so equally complex. How did he build this seal?" "Wait, remember who his father was? Sarutobi, and this is to be expected?" The blonde held his head down and the old Hokage asked, "And what, dear Naruto, caused you such a great interest in seals?" The old Hokage never saw a flash of memory to judge by the boy's eyes. Technique of memory placement. Because he had asked a question, Naruto had just been given the worst beating he had experienced in the previous 6 years, and he was lying on the ground curled up in a ball. "What exactly do seals do, sir?" Lifting the 10-year-old boy into the air and shouting at him, the man behind the counter snarled. "They keep defenseless villagers safe from demons and the pain that their illusions cause. Nothing that you could possibly use, monster. They're used to help people." There was nothing else to hear as Naruto's mind started to open up and start asking him unknowable questions. A monster fist buried itself in his face, causing him to fly back and get jumped and beaten for almost nothing. This ripped him from his mental contemplation as he felt his lungs close without his knowledge. The villagers finally abandoned the boy here and demonstrated how he got into his current situation. Despite being battered, bruised, and bleeding, he had remained incredibly focused on the thought that seals could help me. Cancel method. Naruto shrugged as he poured chakra into the seal on the floor and started the pain, looking to his closest family member for support. It hurts. Oh Kami. Please don't keep this happening to me, please, I am sorry, just make the pain go away. Sob. Sob. Oh god, it hurts so much. Ah. The blonde's seemingly arbitrary outburst startled the third Hokage, who watched in horror as the ink crawled up the boy, boiling and burning his skin until it was finished, and the poor boy lay on the now bare floor, looking as though he had just been beaten to a pulp. The Hokage placed a hand to Naruto's neck while leaning on a knee beside him. He saw the boy looking out with so much unremembered pain that he almost started crying in front of the blonde until he approached him and posed the crucial question. The blonde's response, "Naruto, why did you make the seal, and why did you administer it with so much pain twice?" may have frightened the Hokage more than anything else he had ever heard the boy say. "By trading one pain for one far worse, I can ignore the second and finally find my answers. Pain shows the answer to all things. The villagers told me so." The Hokage was in such a hurry that he failed to notice the young girl with the dark blue hair, and he was unable to look at the vanquished boy and his excruciating pain. She glanced into the room and saw the Hokage walking quickly away. A moment later, she bolted off, crashing the vase of flowers to the ground and startling the boy back to his pre-Sandame disposition. "Why did Gigi leave? I only answered his questions. Who brought the flowers? The flowers are pretty. What kind are they? Who cared enough to bring me flowers?" After 3 days pushing his hair back, Naruto wore a pair of blue goggles on his forehead as he strolled through the village. He had gotten them anonymously many years prior, and they held great personal significance for him. Although he was aware that he was required to wear a headband, he thought the goggles served a more useful purpose. He could wear them to conceal the pain that the village was pushing at him. Naruto was on his way to the academy, planning to take the genin exam today. He was unable to concentrate, and he discovered that his thoughts were not racing with so many different ideas. He took this as an indication that he simply needed to sharpen his focus. But even after he thought he had finally blocked out the plethora of questions, he felt them creep back into his thoughts. Who brought me the flowers? Why didn't Gigi come back to the hospital after the first visit? And what will the exam cover? Am I well enough for the taijutsu portion? Someone cared enough to try and bring them to me. Who could it have been? Who would like to be nice to me? Sakura would only do something like that for Sasuke, so she is out, Naruto said. Pausing as his hand reached his chest, he had to thank whoever it was, since the head of one of the hospital flowers was in his inside jacket pocket after all. Who could it have been? It must have been a girl I know, and most guys wouldn't bring flowers to another man I know, but more importantly, WHO? Naruto's tirade was interrupted as he entered the schoolyard. While making his way to the entrance, he passed the majority of the students and went to class. It would be inaccurate to describe Hinata Hyuga as a social butterfly. She didn't act like the weak, helpless girl that most girls would like to be, even though she was arguably the strongest kunoichi of the year. Her extreme shyness and lack of initiative were bad traits for someone like her. But she did have one thing. She was completely smitten with a certain Uzumaki Naruto. Even though he wasn't the fastest in a race or the smartest in everything, he had a charismatic personality that made you want to be around him. That is, until recently. When she was stalked, she meant that after pursuing her crush, she discovered that he was completely unlike anyone she knew. Naruto was a tormented person. It seemed like he was constantly thinking about something and was unable to concentrate on anything else because something else was always grabbing his attention. She had discovered that he had a lot of questions, along the lines of someone who wanted to know everything about everything through first-hand experience or knowledge, but lately, even his typical behavior has been overshadowed by a deep, complex need to ask questions. A few days ago, she discovered that he would ask his body in horrifying and frightening ways to the young Hyuga girl when he had no one to ask the questions to. As his mother used to say, knowing everything about life takes all the fun out of living it. Hinata nodded when she saw Naruto give him a loving pat on the chest, saying, he just needs someone to be with him and show him that not everything has to have an answer. She activated her bloodline while standing behind a tree, bewildered. In a flash of her own chakra, she discovered something that unquestionably made her young heart sing. Byabyawakua Byaukugan. She put both of her hands to her chest and wrapped them around one another. Naruto, the inquisitive blonde Adonis, had 2 scrolls, a long piece of purple ribbon, and one of her own grown flower heads in his coat pocket. In order to admire her longtime crush and hopefully something in the future, she quickly deactivated her own dujutsu. As she made her way to the classroom, he sat in his seat and started to twiddle his fingers in a few songs that she remembered from her time at the playhouse with her father and younger sister. Is Naruto-kun a music lover? How come he never told anyone about it? Does anyone else know? I had no idea. Shall I go up to him? How would I respond? Hinata was thinking about this when Naruto heard a fight behind him. He turned to see a big boy and a fur-collared boy fighting over who was attempting to steal his chips. I wonder who started this argument and whether it would be worthwhile to try to end it. It seems like nothing has changed while I've been away. Does anything ever change? Naruto thought about this way of thinking until he became aware of something. He didn't know why, but the quiet girl in the row he was sitting in a few days ago had the most adored and cherishable look on her face, and it captivated him so much that he started walking toward the object of his interest before he even realized it. What am I doing? Before Naruto realized what he was doing, he thought he was replacing her right arm with his proximity. Have I lost it? I don't want everyone to think that I am completely attention handicapped, but she just looks so pretty. I wonder what facial muscles have to pull to create that specific face. It is just so pretty. He was directly in front of her, close enough that, if she had the guts to try, she could reach out and touch him. Hinata felt a presence and looked up, only to have her face turn red and let out a eep. His hand was about to touch hers, but it broke as he reached out, nearly causing her to faint. Naruto turned to face Kiba, who was a few inches away from him, and asked, "Hey Dobi, what are you doing to Hinata?" He wondered if this was a bad idea, but all of his thoughts returned at once. What do Kiba and Akamaru want? I approached her without doing anything. Is there some reason why she doesn't like me? Does she belong to Kiba? How should I react to this? Perhaps I should just take a seat and try to act as though nothing happened, or should I keep my pride intact? Kiba isn't the best student, but he could hurt me in a fight, so it wouldn't be a good idea after I got out of the hospital. Naruto tried to apologize and stop Kiba's retaliation in the same move, but he was thrown off balance when he heard the boy yell at him once more and push him back, causing him to fall behind the poor girl. She tightened her shoulders, indicating that she is anxious and tense around me. She must be afraid of me. Am I really that frightening? That smell, those are from the flowers, so it was someone close to her. I mean, I don't do anything bad. As Kiba kicked him, Naruto sat up, felt his cuts throb, leapt to his feet, and punched the dog boy, knocking him over in shock. In order to tie the length of ribbon he had purchased to tie around his scroll on theories of why questions replicated, Naruto turned to face Hinata and reached into his pocket. She accepted it with trembling hands, but the furious Kiba then tackled him from behind to the ground and continued to strike his back under his shirt and jacket. He could sense every word the fist made contact with. He reacted by saying that he had fought with the older civilian boys when he felt Kiba's hands suddenly reach for his neck. Before Kiba could recover, Naruto remembered one of the things he had learned to protect himself from bullies and some villagers. Kiba was shocked to discover that the blonde had rolled over and was holding his arms away. His knee then slammed into his chest, causing him to let go, and Naruto tackled him back twice as far as Kiba had hit him. Hinata watched in awe as Naruto wrapped one hand around Kiba's throat and then a foot, grabbed Kiba's left arm with the other arm, and locked Kiba's remaining arm with the other leg. Hinata was astounded when he pulled tightly as Naruto practiced the clan's 8 gates maneuvers. She noticed that one of her pants legs had hiked up, revealing a muscle that resembled a coiled spring. As Kiba lay there, Naruto tried to free himself from his grip. No chance. How can I incapacitate now? Pass out? A tiger's neck pull? Maybe a quick 180-degree turn to the right, followed by a 3-hour muscular spasmodic knockout? That will work, yes. Kiba rolled on his side and sputtered as if he had been forced underwater, and Naruto was about to end this altercation when he felt 2 pairs of hands tug him away. Shino and Choji were holding Naruto back when he turned to glare at the two who had set him free. He was aware that he had the opportunity to flee and carry on busting Kiba, and this was the ideal time. In just a few seconds, Naruto had freed his arm from Shino and grabbed Choji, pushing him away, letting Shino and Choji know that Naruto was not to be taken lightly. A sharp elbow to the boy's stomach caused him to hunch, which allowed Naruto to pull him into the air with his left leg. Naruto then swiftly twisted his arm between his side and arm, locking it between his head and shoulders, and slammed Shino head and shoulders first into the floor, rendering him immobile. Shino approached him from behind, his right arm grabbing his stomach and his left arm aiming for his head. Choji arrived next, intending to give him a bear hug and hold him there until their senseis arrived. Choji lost his balance and was knocked to the ground by the blonde's shoulder, stunning him as well. After Naruto swung around and grabbed the boy's short arm grab, he then moved to his immediate inner left, blocking the back of his foot with his right foot. Hinata saw her blonde crush use a strange grabbing and throwing technique to quickly disable 2 of the most skilled taijutsu practitioners in their year. After witnessing Naruto use his stylized grappling style to quickly dismantle half of the male class, she finally understood why he was not as at ease punching and kicking as the other students. As he centered his breathing, Naruto glanced around at the half-defeated class and noticed Kiba staring at him in terror before snarling and charging. Naruto then performed a slide tackle, knocking Kiba to his back, where he rolled behind him, his left forearm applying tremendous pressure to his chest while his right forearm choked him. A poof startled him just as he was about to tighten, and a log materialized. A log replacement. Who did it, though? Were those 2? Or another boy? Perhaps a metamorphosis to let me slip? That's it, I'll keep my hold. Naruto was startled out of his reverie when he felt himself being seized and tied. Right away he turned to see that Mizuki had subdued him and that Iruka was examining Shino, Kiba, and Choji to see who was most injured. Iruka walked and gave the blonde a stern look, but to his surprise, he only received a savage glare in return. Iruka could hear them discussing what had just happened in whispers that reverberated throughout the room. Did you see? Yeah, he took out Kiba, Shino, and Choji with that weird grabbing thing. Did you him flip Shino with that one move? That shouldn't be possible. Yeah, my mother must be right, he is a monster. And did you see that smile he had when Kiba started to choke? No one I know who is sane enjoys battle that much. Iruka turned to face Naruto, who was glaring around with such intensity that a Hyuga and other girls shied away when he saw her, and more significantly, the ribbon she had tied to her wrist beneath the sleeve of her jacket. He stopped. I would have ignored everything else, but why the dog boy had to go for my seals on my neck? Calm. The fight is over. There's no point in this. Is he aware? Shall I try to run? However, I don't want to lose the attractive girl, do I? The class erupted in applause as he observed everyone talking about their test. Well, since Naruto has demonstrated such ridiculously effective taijutsu, he will not need to take that portion, so let's begin the exam. I can still pass, but what else are there? What about dispelling? Genjutsu casting? Then there's ninjutsu, which I can do all but the Bushin. What if I have to do all 3? What do I do? Conclusion of the test with a lot of cheers and shouts of, "Awesome!" Naruto sat in one of the final 3 seats as he watched the Uchiha emerge and execute all 3 and a fireball jutsu. Uzumaki, let's see you take a shot. Naruto got up and moved to the center, observing that the only people observing him were the attractive girl and Nara. The others were gathered around the Uchiha. After flying through the first 2 and noticing that the others were still congratulating the Uchiha, Naruto nodded and watched as he pulled an absurd amount of chakra in the hopes of forcing the Bushin to work through sheer chakra mass, and then everything literally went up in his face. Naruto, Kurarami, Henge, and Bushin. Fortunately, Naruto hit the wall head first to prevent the scars from throbbing as he fell bruised to the ground after an explosion sent him crashing into the wall with the force of a cannonball. The class looked up. Iruka called out to him to come back and try again with less chakra, but he did not hear and was gone in a blur, which made one with black eyes scoff. He looked up to see people laughing at him and some even making snide remarks. He growled and fled for the window. As the rest of the class laughed, with the exception of a few who felt somewhat the same, Hinata watched after him with a disappointed expression, thinking, he tried so hard, and he still made it. She let out a silent tear. Across from the retail area, in the trees, why would a pretty girl be interested in him? Why should he try when he was bound to fail? But he ended up scarring that one out. He couldn't believe that. He had the seals on his neck to prove it. Why did he enjoy fighting so much? What did that girl mean when she said his grinning at winning a feat was a monstrous thing to do? Naruto added as he sat in a tree, watching blood roll down his arms. As he watched the blood trickle down his arms, he started to smear it and tried to wipe it off, determined not to endure this for another year. I just need a chance to prove that I am better than this, but how? He uttered those words as his thumb rolled over one that pierced his skin. He turned to see his other instructor sitting there grinning and said, I can help with that, really? But it will be hard, the man said, nodding. Naruto flashed one of his big grins, try me. As a young Hyuga watched from a few dozen yards away, he mouthed the words, be careful Naruto-kun. Later, in the forest, skipping the forest scene until the Hokage declares that the scroll is secure and they can all go to sleep. Academy the following day. When Naruto entered the room, there were gasps and cries for Kiba to leave, even to the point of telling him to leave his betters alone. He chose to ignore all of this and concentrate on the attractive girl that had been on his mind. My body has a lot more to learn before I can set my sights on you, but don't worry, I will have you eventually. I swear on my questions and my honor. The two real things that I have. Just wait. Hyuga Hinata, I will make my own answers to the questions that scare me, and I will become stronger through it. Then I will approach you and you won't have to worry about how others will think of you, and I will be worthy for you. He replied with a dark grin and a swift ninja hop to his seat. Hinata blushed as she watched her crush gaze at her and felt a hot sensation travel from her spine to her belly. The door then slams open on its own, using a kunai to scratch the dirt beneath his fingernail. Naruto leapt to his designated desk, which he had been given at the start of the year. A number of the other students gazed at him uneasily, wondering what would happen if he started a killing rampage. As he examined his fingernails, Naruto was unaware of all of this. He had received another anonymous gift this morning, and it was around his neck. Naruto was wearing a small pendant that was in the kanji for wisdom, and next to it was the kanji for question. He had been overjoyed to receive it and had gone around looking for the giver so he could thank them, but when he returned to his apartment, he discovered a wooden flute thing on the window sill. It was shaped like a wishbone, and he could see the holes for his fingerings wound around the split where it became two openings. He had to blow into the top of it to make it work, and he discovered that it lacked a complete way to hold it so that his hands had to be moving constantly. This is strange, huh? I wonder how someone knew that I liked music, and I bet even Gigi doesn't know. Naruto spent the morning turning the instrument over and over until he felt that it was exactly as it looked, nothing different, so he decided to spend the morning learning it. As a result, he was late for his team assignment, but he was still ahead of everyone else because he miscalculated the time and sat waiting. Where are the new senseis? Why in the world would someone enjoy waiting? It seems like a complete waste of time and patience. In the office of the Hokage, as the Hokage focused on this year's graduating class, the Junin gathered around the crystal. What they saw wasn't too bad. Everyone believed the Aburame clan's Shino kid would be very valuable. The Uchiha was someone they all desired, and he could shape and teach him almost anything. Then there was the Jinchuriki. The Hokage had proven that the rumors that he had learned justice from the scroll were true, and he now knew the following. Naruto Uzumaki failed the test 4 times before being promoted by the estimated help on a field mission and returning the scroll he had taken. With the exception of the Bushin, who displayed terrible chakra control that seemed to be caused by his inability to focus on such a small amount of chakra, the Basic Academy 3 did not explain how he learned all of the jutsu from the scroll yesterday. He was now a walking explosive expert, having learned 2 fire jutsu, Asuma's burning ash accumulation and the Kansai Bakuden no jutsu, firebomb technique, as well as the Kage Bushin no jutsu and its weapon variation techniques, shuriken, kunai, demon wind shuriken, and surprising the wire technique. Apparently, there was no lightning jutsu. The only 2 were the lightning dragon assault and Kakashi's rakery. Luckily, the dragon assaults had very different uses and requirements and were not mentioned in the Forbidden Scroll. Additionally, Kakashi did not teach anyone the rakery, so there was no risk of a lightning bomb going off in the middle of the village. The water style was unexpected, but he appeared to have an easy time with it, and he had actually learned a fair amount. The water spike was not surprising because the boy had a lot of raw chakra, and he had also learned the Mizu Bushin and the Mizukaiso technique, water reflection clone technique, which was amazing because it required a Junin's control. The last one made the Sandame nervous because they had used the Yamanaka to steal the technique from the mind of a missing mist ninja, and Naruto learned it first and quickly. The Sendo Aim no Jutsu, Death Rain skill, was another fire supplementary jutsu, Kokun no Jutsu, Black Cloud's technique. Sarutobi shook his head, saying, apparently the boy has in his mind that since he can't always run around with a mountain of exploding tags on his person, he will know how to make an equivalent. Subsequently, Naruto learned two Earth Jutsu, the Doryu Heki, Mud Wall technique, and the Doryuden, Earth Dragon projectile, which he apparently learned with Sarutobi in mind. The Junins thought it was a little strange that the boy had only spent time learning the two jutsu that Sarutobi could perform with such skill, but they decided to overlook this. Last but not least, he had learned a few wind techniques, including the Futon Daitapa, the Futon Furyuden no Jutsu, Wind Dragon technique, the Kazekiri no Jutsu, Wind Drill technique, and Kyushu no Toshin, Assassin's Rush. He could also use some conjunction techniques with the water techniques, most of which caused rain or storms. However, Sarutobi had summoned himself and killed Mizuki with almost no effort after finding them with the crystal, so Naruto had been spared from learning of the fox. The boy had had a very eventful night, and when they noticed a disturbance, they turned to the crystal classroom at the academy. As he finished his nails, Naruto looked back and saw a huge drop of sweat. He looked up to see Yamanka Ino and one Sakura Haruno fighting to get through the door. This is my desk. I have been here since the semester began. I am not moving, they both said, glaring at him for not using a different desk. He lowered his head, inhaled deeply, and turned back to face the two girls, who were still glaring at him. When the blonde signed his death warrant, everyone gasped, and Sakura let out a scream. This is my desk. Either move, Baka, or I'll move you. Naruto shook his head, wondering if he should take this as an offensive claim and act accordingly. After thinking about what he and his clones had learned the previous evening, he was startled when a fist struck the back of his head, sending him face first into his desk and causing his nose to bleed. After glaring at them, Naruto got up, and the girls retreated a step to make room for the blonde to make hand signals in front of them. They watched in awe as the sign ended, with all of his fingers closed to his palm except for his middle ones, which were pointing upward. Naruto then stepped forward and flipped both of the girls off, extending his arms so that his fingers dangled in their faces and calling them to fall backwards. I am glad I thought of this. What other uses could hand signs have then, I wonder, and I also need to find a better weapon for close range, as kunai and shuriken do not an arsenal make. With Naruto in a different seat and Sakura in his final seat, Iruka appeared. Kiba, whose neck was bandaged from the numerous chokes he had received the day before, glared at Naruto, who hissed like a cat. In response, the boy leapt to his feet, but Shikamaru grabbed his arm and pulled him back down, a furious dog boy. The class half cheered, and Iruka thought he heard a train whistle but chose to ignore it. Okay everyone, today you are officially genin, and you are here to take the next step in your careers. To meet your Junin sensei. Alright Team 1. Seira Naomi, Taki Banzas, Seiyu Shire, your Junin sensei is Gecko Hayate. Team 2. A. Naruto made an effort to pay attention, but he started to reflect after the fact that the skill that these teams have is abysmal. I had better grades in class. Speaking of class, who will win Rookie of the Year? Sasuke or Shino? Probably Kunoichi of the Year. Ino or the attractive Hyuga. It's Hinata, right? I think it is anyway, but I could be wrong. She is the Hyuga clan heiress, isn't she? I can't recall anything clearly after that shuriken to the head, but I suppose it will come back to me, which reminds me. Iruka-sensei's voice increased in volume as Naruto unzipped his jacket, reached into the pocket, took out the headband he had received from Iruka, removed his goggles, tied them to his forehead, tapped a knuckle against it, and nodded. Pulling the goggles down to rest on top of the headband, he tried moving his head, but felt no real difference, and nodded. Team 7. Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haranoa. No. Together, Sakura and Naruto yelled, with Sakura saying she had to assist her Sasuke-kun after Naruto made a colorful comment about where Iruka could put this messed up list. And Sasuke Uchiha. Yes, 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 Sasuke-kun is mine, so screw you, Ino pig. For heaven's sake, this fracken is awful out of our year. I have the biggest ego and the biggest banshee. Damn. I need to have at least a decent sensei, but I don't know many Junin, only that guy fellow that Gigi says to run from and that Asuma guy. That is Gigi's son. I need to get a new weapon for close range, eat, sleep, and try to figure out who gave me the gift of the double pendant. I wonder if he will take long. This entire setup needs to be scrapped and revamped. This is stupidity, and that is stupidity. Tower of Hokage. Those are the students from this year. You are all familiar with your teams, and I anticipate that you will meet with them promptly. You're fired. The Junin started to depart, but one of them halted. Aside from you, Kakashi, I need to talk about your team. He can honestly say that he expected this as the Junin moved away from the group and stood in front of the Hokage, watching as the man stood and picked up his hat. Let us go, Kakashi. You said you wanted a closer look into the personal life of your students, and I try to value and accommodate to the needs of my ninja, the man said while lighting his pipe. If I may ask, Hokage-sama, who were you accommodating by letting the village idiot use the sealing scroll for more than 12 hours? Like I said, Kakashi, all of my ninja, even if they are not technically ninjas at the moment. The Junin sighed as he followed the elderly man out of the tower, laughing as he closed and locked his door. The academy, oh my. The last two people in the room stared at Naruto, who shook his head. Our sensei has been late for more than 2 hours, and he makes me so mad. Sakura was interrupted as Naruto raised 5 fingers and slowly counted down before reaching a fist. He then leaned back in his chair and pulled up his left sleeve, revealing a gleaming black and bronze metal wristwatch. What he has, or do you think that I can't count time? Maybe you should leave me and Sasuke be your Allah. As Sasuke sighed and turned back to face the window, Sakura yelled, now it has been 2 hours. Naruto simply shook his head and said, maybe this means something, but if he keeps making us wait and delaying my plans for the day, I will have to unleash a wind jutsu on him. That makes me wonder why those techniques require so little chakra, along with water, while the earth and fire techniques require perhaps twice as much. Could there be an affinity difference that makes one more situated around certain affinities? Hold on. I believe I have a scroll about this somewhere from the Shinobi tool store. Whatever you want to call it, at Naruto's house, apartment, shack, etc. Even though Sakura's parents had been excruciatingly noisy and the Uchiha family's house was like a well-maintained shrine, it was still not nearly as eerie as this. Kakashi stood in the living room of what was probably the most mentally ill student he had ever been assigned, and he started to perspire. As you can see, Kakashi, he is nothing like you would think and let others believe. He keeps his interests closely guarded. If the seals on the door were any indication. The Junin gave a weak nod. There were half-destroyed scrolls, books, articles, full-scale replicas, weapons, and textbooks all over the blonde's house, which was a mess and not the trash and complicated standings one would typically think of, but a mess of answers. He assumed that the large pile of written materials in the middle of the room was actually his couch after finding pillows and a shabby blanket underneath them. Hokage-sama, what is he attempting to learn? Kakashi picked up a scroll that had fallen from its perch and put it back in its place as the Hokage turned to face the Junin, swearing he could see every line in the old man's face at that precise moment. Unknowingly, Naruto is searching for a cure. I think that's the best way to respond to the question, Kakashi said, glancing at the man before he asked his next query. What is a remedy for, Hokage-sama? The man turned and gestured toward a pile of books, which Kakashi approached and examined. I have delved deep into the theological standings, along with the philosophical and physical manifestations, and I have yet to find my answers. To pain, miserable feelings, the reason why my body is so completely capable of taking incredible punishment, why my blood boils when it comes in contact with water, why I can't seem to get the pretty girl out of my mind, and perhaps the real question is how do I escape it all? He discovered on top of a scroll that contained an indiscreet code that he quickly deciphered. The Junin looked to the Hokage and set down the scroll. Since he started his 3rd year at the academy, Naruto has been arguably the smartest student you will ever have. He doesn't display it, possibly because he has too many questions in his mind to address them all at once. However, every question he asks suggests that he essentially wants to understand the same thing that Ibiki and I do. Naruto wants to get away from the human condition. In the end, all ninja had unanswered questions, but they simply realized there was no point going out there to find and answer them. The blonde wanted to essentially escape being human, but for what? The Junin glanced at him and then turned back to the room to see a new light of this imperceptible theory, a little sad for the boy. The kitchen led to the living room and a hallway. They exited the living room and looked into the kitchen, where they discovered more written materials and numerous empty ramen cups. His stove had so much dust on it that he doubted it had ever been used. He used the piping for the gas line to repair his shower. That explained it. A bedroom, an apparent office with a door locked with the same seals as the front door, a bathroom, and an additional bedroom. How anyone could sleep on a bed covered in ink, scrolls, books, charts, graphs, and the largest arrays of seals he had ever seen. were the next 4 rooms that led from the hallway. The bathroom lacked some floorboards, which you could see if you looked at the sides of the medicine cabinets. He pulled his head out of the room and crossed the hall, knocking on the bedroom door before it creaked open and the two entered. It makes sense for someone who has completely and utterly taken care of themselves for so long to be able to work quickly and not need to look for something, he said, describing the clean, well-stocked, and fully accessible cabinets. Everything he didn't have in the house was crammed into it, from floor to ceiling. Ninja tools, explosive notes in a box that read, "Keep away from flames or fluctuating chakra." Clothes were hanging in the closet, including 2 more jumpsuits, and a number of ruined white shirts were lying around in tatters. The Sandame walked across the room and inspected his dresser, which was equipped with multiple strong ninja padlocks designed to prevent entry without a specific key. He sighed and tapped the middle of each lock, causing them to open, while Kakashi stood beside him and looked inside. A single blade from a demon shuriken swished across the top of the drawer as Kakashi reached for one of the 2 folders, which were crammed to the brim with papers, drawings, and long descriptions. One read medical history, while the other said personally made seals. "Maybe just a little protective, but I placed that on the villagers," he said, sweating. Since everyone had their own little secrets, they postponed looking at the office they wanted to see after the close amputation in the boys' bedroom. They closed Naruto's front door while they stood there, taking in the change in atmosphere. As Kakashi started to leave, the elderly man nodded and said, "Well, that is enough for me to learn what I need to administer my test. I will see you at the debriefing, Hokage-sama." "Kakashi, you may have made a grave mistake just now. You never did try to figure out how much knowledge Naruto truly knows, but I am afraid you may learn in time." 15 minutes later, Academy Naruto sat up in his chair. He had been trying to recall how to apply the chakra to its fullest potential and how to shape it from each of the jutsu he had learned. The door opened, revealing their tardy sensei, and Naruto saw it right away. "He has been in my home. My chakra lingering seals must have deployed on him when he walked past my doorway. Why was he in my home? What did he look for? Was he in my office? How long should I keep this information secret? Where is everyone else?" Naruto asked, realizing that the other 2 were no longer present, and locating them in the doorway next to Kakashi. The 3 nodded and went to the roof, where the blonde noticed that it was almost sunset and hurried to the roof, groaning. "Well, my first impression, the blonde one is a little slow, so let's go to the roof and we will talk there." The kunoichi of the group were staring at the Uchiha, and the Uchiha were staring at him as if he should have screamed that he was his teacher who would make him powerful. Kakashi stood there, leaning against the wall, facing the 3. The blonde had not said anything, and appeared to be thinking while scratching at an itch inside his jacket. "All right, let's finish the introductions now that everyone is present. My name is Hitaki Kakashi, and I have a lot of interests. I also detest my enemies." "Girl, you're next," Sakura said as she got up to introduce herself. "My name is Haruno Sakura. I like to read, and I look at Sasuke and blush. I detest Naruto and Ino Pig." The blonde seemed to take in what she said and file it away, and when he saw their blood on his fingertips, he thought, how has he done nothing, just scratching his side? Wait, was that a knife? Also, I have never seen him wear a turtleneck before the graduation. Is he hiding something? My hobbies include a... Both of them gave him dead looks when he said, "Okay, Sunshine, you're Upa A." "Okay, the blonde one," the black-haired one said, turning to face the blonde, who grabbed a hair on his head and pulled it out before speaking, confirming that it was indeed blonde. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. What comes next?" His question caused the 3 of them to perspire in unison. Kakashi shook his head and said, "Likes, dislikes, dreams, and hobbies." The blonde glanced at them before placing his hand to his chin and gazing up at the sky. The brooder nodded as they all looked at the blonde and said, Okay, Sasuke, you are up, while Naruto thinks about whatever it is he is thinking about. Start god-awful Uchiha intro." After the whiny bitch finished, the blonde considered his many possible answers and decided that being safe was the best course of action. "What do I like now? What are my hobbies aside from learning new things? What do I dislike? What are my dreams?" he asked himself. As previously stated, my name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I enjoy jutsu and fighting techniques. A young girl also looks really lovely when she has a small curve in her nose and eyebrows. My annoyances are straightforward. He, pointing to the Uchiha, her, pointing to Sakura, your sluggish ass, pointing to his new sensei, and a lot more. He points with his arms toward the village, purposefully avoiding any approach to the monument on the horizon. My interests are inquiring and recording the information with the answers I have already discovered in the safest location. I am aware of dreams are more difficult, I suppose, to realize my ultimate solution, the one that will alter the essence of life itself, that's all. They all perked up as they gazed at the man, who was making a high-pitched whistle sound and seemed ready to take off. Naruto maintained a steady gaze while Kakashi sighed. "Well, I might as well tell you." He handed each of them a piece of paper as he watched Naruto click his fingers, and the paper folded itself as he placed it in his outside pocket. "As you all know, you have graduated the academy, and have been given me as a sensei. You do not know that in order to pass the squad test you must complete a mission of your sensei's training expertise, and mine will be explained by these pieces of paper. Alright, everyone, this is the part you might not enjoy. 66% of the classes that passed the Genin exam were returned to the academy because they were deemed incapable of completing their sensei's assignment. Regretfully for everyone, in all the time I have been assigned a Genin team, I have never passed one. Given that you have an 85% chance of failing, would you still like to defy expectations and try to pass my test?" I thought he would have been the first to grasp the thought and put his hand up. "Interestingly," the silver-haired man said, turning to face the team, which was taken aback when two of them nodded, but the blonde remained motionless. It's not like they all knew what he could do, and he would be damned if he was sent back without a red carpet. "So if we fail, I am basically sent back to a place I could never actually get out of skill-wise, as I have now learned that the Bushin is mandatory for each exam, or I go forward and find my answers, and eventually the reasoning behind my real planning. Not really much of an argument." Naruto nodded. The Junin then vanished in a puff of chakra after saying, "Well, okay. Everyone, I will see you tomorrow at Training Ground 7, at 8 o'clock, don't be late." There were 3 groups of 50 clones learning how to use the reach, weight, strength, offensive, and defensive capabilities of his new weapon, and Naruto sat in front of the middle training log of Team 7A not because he had to, but because he was 3 hours ETA before his test with Kakashi, which he apparently called the Bell Test. He shook his head as 2 more were scattered by a weapon deadlock that ended with 2 new maneuvers, saying, "Remember how to utilize these moves. I wonder how well someone could utilize clones on the fly. What if I had them disperse by using a clone jutsu themselves, and I could make them constantly change between shadow to water?" "Perfect," Naruto nodded as he stood and headed deep into the forest, ready to practice the new shadow water clone blitz he had thought of after watching the owl Anbu and see if he could replicate and add to it. Naruto grinned ominously as he made his way toward the village. "Even though my sensei is a Junin, I will demonstrate to him how to compete against me in a constantly shifting battle environment. Let's also see how qualified he is, ha ha." When the Bell Test was administered with an egg and cheese sandwich in his hand, Naruto approached the posts, only to be met with 2 equally enraged glares and growling stomachs. He glanced at his sandwich and then at them. "You fools. Stop staring at me. You ought to have gotten your own breakfast if you wanted it. How in the world do I resemble your mother's?" The Uchiha huffed and Sakura developed a tick mark after the 2 blinked in response to the unexpected insult. "We weren't supposed to have breakfast, Yubaka. The instructions said so." After glancing at her, Naruto took out his paper and examined it. The Banshee roared and rolled up her sleeve, ready to beat down her blonde teammate. The Avenger simply rolled his eyes, saying, "Stupid blonde. Probably couldn't stop eating a meal if his life depended on him. 7 inches come battle ready. Don't eat food unless you want to Pekea. Well, I am sure that I can keep my food down, unlike you two." When a kunai nearly removed Sasuke's left eye, he retaliated. The blonde was still crouching, revealing a smoke-colored turtleneck underneath his orange jacket. His gaze remained unwaveringly focused on the thief, his hand moving in the same direction as his kunai had just flown. "I know that look. That's where some high and mighty so-called prodigy lords over his teammates, saying that they are completely incapable. If you are going to think along those lines, try to at least learn to either control his facial features, or look away from someone who has all thoughts and supposed reason to put a kunai in each eye." Uchiha Sasuke made a fist and glared at the blonde, daring to speak to Uchiha. Sasuke turned to face the knife and saw that it was well out of sight. The Dobi had apparently thrown it quite forcefully. "Dobi needs a humility lesson. I will teach him to respect the mighty Uchiha clan." Naruto snorted and straightened up, a grim line forming across his features. Baka apologized to Sasuke-kun. His clan is the strongest in Konoha, even stronger than the Junin. But he was practically leaping inside, signaling success, getting ready for Sensei's arrival. The blonde interrupted the two by saying, "What clan? Sasuke is the only one left. One person does not make a clan. And I know I have tried to bend the rule by the governing body of Konoha." Had he attempted to apply for clan status? As the 3 turned around, Kakashi said, "Well, since you all are pretty on edge, how about we start the exercise?" And he walked back to them while holding a red-taped kunai. Shit. Did he detect that before the clones received the signal? If so, I would need to prepare my counter before the test begins. However, I can sense my clone's presence and my chakra is still well hidden among the trees. I simply need to send them another signal. He reached to put his kunai in his holster, but it fell out and fell on the ground. Naruto cursed as he picked it up. Naruto, I thought I would return you your kunai before the test started, the blonde nodded. A clone smiled and dispelled. All I have to do now is use one of my storm, rain jutsu, but I must use one immediately. But which one? To keep the plan for a fire offensive to one area where Kakashi will go for that river to protect himself, I will obviously start with a clone using the Jinkou no Jutsu, artificial rain skill. When I have enough, I will use another to start the Kokun no Jutsu, black rain skill, in a select area. This reminds me that I sent a clone to learn a fire jutsu to act as a match a while ago, so I should wait for the black rain until I have that move to ignite it. I need something smaller, so I'll wait to use the black rain until my clone provides me the details. The burning ash and the Kansai Bakuden jutsu are too much and will waste too much chakra to replenish the rain. I can use the rain dragon technique, or Koryu no jutsu, until I have enough time to use my shadow water clone blitz or a fire attack. If nothing else works, I'll then employ the 1S rank move I managed to master prior to Mizuki's appearance, but I'll need to tone it down significantly to avoid depleting my chakra. For what reason did the Hokage allow me to retain the scrolls of rain, storm techniques? Does he want me to become proficient in those particular jutsu? Enough thinking, I've got a strategy? Since the Hokage hadn't mentioned those conjunction moves he was familiar with, Kakashi had a bad feeling and scowled when he saw the smile. He wasn't sure why, but he was worried he would soon find out. Alright everyone, ready to begin? He asked, and the three nodded after glancing around to see what he meant as he smashed a rock aside and struck an alarm clock to set it off. Kakashi's eye grinned. He said, time to begin then, and then he launched forward, using a combination of helicopter kicks to split the three apart. He turned to Naruto, or rather 7 of him, after observing Sakura and Sasuke dash into the trees. Shadow clones. He sighed and reached into his pouch to pull out a book. Interesting. I wonder how many he had thought up. Better not give him time to think. Kakashi blinked as all 7 charged at him. When the clones saw the book, they halted, and 6 of them attacked while one made a hand seal, apparently not seeing the book as a weakness against the Junin. Kakashi looked up with a drop of perspiration and went on to battle the boys' clones. He used a roundhouse to remove 2, a haymaker to remove the final one, and threw another into the other 2. As he turned to face the final one, he was swiftly replaced by a futon Daitapa, who ripped the area where he stood to pieces. Sasuke and Sakura saw the jutsu from where they were hiding. They both gaped before recalling what Iruka had said. Flash of time. Iruka turned to face the class when he noticed Shikamaru raise his hand and nod. Well class, we thought that there was going to be a shortage of eligible students to make teams, but it seems the class troublemaker has pulled another trick from his sleeve, having learned something allowing him to pass. The class moaned as Iruka continued. This is really kind of troublesome, but what did he learn that would allow him to pass just like that? Iruka shook his head and grinned at them. You will have to wait and see for yourselves. Sasuke recalled that after meeting their sensei, the blonde had entirely vanished from sight when he attempted to locate him to teach him the technique. Sasuke was enraged by this since he knew the blonde lacked the cunning to hide from him, but no one saw him that afternoon when the Avenger asked. Sasuke decided to unleash his kunai barrage on Kakashi after noticing that he didn't appear to be very aware. However, the man vanished and the two moved to avoid detection. Alongside Naruto, when Naruto finally decided he was far enough away to avoid their target's notice, he stopped and clasped his hands. 6 shadow clones materialized instantly. The 4 clones nodded as they fled, and the other 2 sprinted for the river and jumped on it, heading toward the center and downstream to where the Junin was last. Okay, start the plan. Uzumaki Battlefield. After hurling himself back through the tree, Naruto confronted an unconscious Sakura. Good, not dead, but will be out for a while, he said, looking at her bewildered before checking her pulse. I didn't bring any smelling salts. As he sped through the trees to the exam's starting point, Naruto picked up the girl and said, oh well, better get her to a safer position. He then appeared next to the posts, placing Sakura against the left one. The clones must have arrived at their positions because he stopped while standing and grinned. He felt the 2 sentries scatter, alerting him to their position, and he looked up. He gave himself a nod and made a series of hand signals. After saying, Kaden, Heizekisho, the blonde threw a huge amount of ash into the air and watched as it mostly gathered in one spot. He then leapt back, shielding his arms while spitting a spark and clicking his teeth into the ash. Phase 1 is finished. Phase 2 has begun. Looking up, Kakashi felt Sasuke touch a bell. After blocking his second blow, he turned to see him frowning, and as he charged forward, he saw the Uchiha's hands shoot his chakra out, turning to the fireball. only for Kakashi to shoot backwards from it and vanish. Only his head was above the ground when he yanked Sasuke underground. A moment later he grinned down at the boy, who was clearly furious. Very good, Sasuke, you are leaps and bounds above your teammates, but still not good enough to be able to go toe-to-toe with a Junin. Maybe you guys should regroup, and I applaud you on the fireball. It's the largest I have ever seen from someone in your age group. Both of them came to a halt when they noticed Naruto's Kaden attack burning out in a dozen different directions high in the sky. Kakashi was taken aback as Sasuke gazed at it with awe and jealousy. Did Naruto do it by himself? The chakra density and reserve required for an attack of that magnitude are equivalent to those of a special Junin. Kakashi nodded before vanishing, and Sasuke used his unique escape technique to climb out of the dirt and sprint in the direction of the assault. And so on. When Kakashi emerged into the clearing, she saw Naruto standing above Sakura, telling her that she was to blame for being in the line of attack. Kakashi looked down at his lone female pupil as he shushed over and shoved Naruto away. Sakura was lying on the ground, moaning weakly, describing how painful it was and how she was unable to feel her face because of a big fire nature chakra burn. Kakashi cursed because he didn't see Naruto take a few steps back, nearly stepping into Sasuke, who stared at the picture in disbelief and at Naruto as though he weren't quite human. The boy was staring at Naruto with a broad smile that threatened to split in two. He laughed and waved before vanishing quickly into the trees, unaware of the reason. Sasuke took care of him and pursued him into the trees. When Sasuke's shuriken flew over Naruto's head, he ducked, spun, took a kunai out of his pouch, and slammed it into Sasuke's. As they locked blades, Sasuke glared at him, and Naruto gave him the same gloomy smile. Sasuke simply stared at him as though he were crazy, saying, "Hell, maybe he was. The Dobi is not exactly normal. What is wrong, Sasuke-san? I thought you didn't like Sakura in general. Why would you be so upset in the light that she may have to bed up in a hospital for a time? I thought you would be all for it." Sasuke simply glared at the knowledge seeker, refusing to let go of his impasse. "So Sasuke, I have to retreat and put my newest plan into action pretty quickly, before Kakashi finds me." Sasuke was startled by Naruto's roar after he sighed and poofed away in a substitution. Naruto Uzumaki, USEVERLY, injured and crippled your teammate. Test is over. Get here now. As he fell to his knees, Sasuke was unsure of what to think. Was Sakura disabled? She was annoying, to be sure, but she didn't deserve to suffer like this. The blonde had overreached herself. He picked up the blonde and carried him back to the stumps to grieve for his female teammate after turning to see an unconscious Naruto a short distance away. And so on. Through a memory of scattered clones, Naruto watched the scene with a smile on his face. One a rank jutsu and everyone thinks she is dead. If it weren't so funny, this would be depressing. He nodded to another clone, and as it dispersed, he felt his chakra rise. Ha ha. As it started to rain, he looked up and said, "Taju Jinkou no Jutsu, success." And so on. Above his blonde pupil, whose arms were bound and secured behind him, stood Kakashi. Sakura was sobbing as she lay in agony a short distance away, lamenting how weak she felt and how she would never again be attractive to Sasuke. The blonde gave him a full smile before saying, "Uzumaki, you have seriously hurt a teammate. You will be kicked out of the ninja ranks for it, and you will likely be prosecuted. Do you realize the consequences of your actions?" As the rain began, the clone vanished, saying, "Sorry Kakashi-san, but guess what, screw you." Sasuke was left with Sakura's wounded form as Kakashi roared and charged out into the wood, his eye nearly exploding with rage. There was a poof the moment Kakashi was out of sight. Sasuke gazed at it, first bewildered, then stunned. Sakura was unharmed, merely complaining that her arm was cut and that it wouldn't look nice. "We were all duped by that Dobi, so that means the bells." Ignoring the pouring rain, Sasuke bounded off into the forest to catch up with Kakashi. At the river's edge, Naruto felt Kakashi's chakra materialize and grinned. Naruto stood on the water, almost certain that he was not looking at him. Shadow clones were a great thing. Another one appeared in his head and dispersed with a fire jutsu, and he grinned. "Kaden. Karyu Enden, Dragon Flame Bomb. Huh, nice choice me. Now my plan is all set. Initiation of Phase 3, Phase 2's completion success." He turned and waved his arm over his head, both ostensibly to his sensei and to signal his fire attack clones to start. He would have plenty of chakra, and if they used it in a diamond formation in tandem, the rain hardly drained anything. This plan is going great, so I suppose Gigi was correct when he said that having all that additional information would help me come up with strategies. This is enjoyable. Kakashi stalked his soon-to-be former pupil. There was no use for ninjas like that in the world, and he had ruined any possibility of cooperation by essentially killing his teammate in order to achieve his own objectives. He didn't pay much attention as the rain briefly decreased before picking up speed again a minute later. As he resumed his hand signs and called out his technique, Naruto grinned and said, "Naruto, you are going to be taken down. I will not have you as a student who completely disregards his teammates' well-being." Now the kid gloves come off. Kaden. Karyu Enden. He grinned to himself as Kakashi moved aside, only to switch to his newly cast Kokun no Jutsu, Black Rain Art, his Heizekisho, Burning Ash Accumulation Technique, and his Kansai Bakuden no Jutsu, Mist Covering Technique. He then made a stop sign to Kakashi, who turned around and saw that Sakura was completely unharmed except for a small, deep cut across her arms. He growled at Naruto, who simply gave him the thumbs up, the last signal. The wind jutsus were coming in 3. You know, most teams haven't had such a completely ignorant and overly exaggerated sensei, don't you think, Sasuke? Sakura, he said 2-1. If it's okay with you, Kakashi, I'd like to quote a very wise current reigning Kage. Fire should never be met head-on, or back first, but rather it should be dispersed before it begins to burn. On that note, try not to roast. Kakashi then saw Naruto making hand gestures as the fire followed the oil on top of the river to the bank. Wait, why was there mist and ash? His earlier attack was done much further away from here. Wait, fire, no retreat. Why can't I move? He looked down to see 2 clones holding his feet in a wire trap underwater. Oh god. Kaden. Blessing of Helios. Kakashi heard 2 cries of Futon. Daitapa. Strike the fire in a semicircle before it spiraled toward him like a monstrous demon. He had been expecting to see the 3 fuel sources ignite and send a burning cloud straight out of a nightmare. In a shout, Kakashi raised his hands and said, Sweden. Suijinheki, water encampment wall. Around Kakashi, a water wall rose, but it was too weak and slow to stop the firestorm. Kakashi simply released his chakra and descended beneath the water, instantly regretting the boiling water when he saw Naruto nowhere to be seen. The Hokage Tower. When the Sandaime felt Naruto's rain clouds materialize while he was completing paperwork, he turned to face the training area and instantly grabbed Naruto's chest. He saw that the apparent rain had dulled the jutsu to the point that it might have been a completely babied attack compared to what it would have been, and the Sandaime instantly vanished to where the chakra source came from. The tornado of fire was sweeping out towards half of the forest before it abruptly stopped and the Sandaime fell to his knees. The jutsu looked so much like the Kyuubi's chakra coming back that he was immobile for a minute. What remained of the 7th training ground? It appears that Naruto used a water technique to extinguish what remained of the fire after it burned away its chakra fuel source, as Kakashi dragged his burned and sore body from what was left of the slowly flowing river. The boy is a danger if we don't get him under control. Kakashi attempted to move but discovered that he was hurt all over and looked up. His feet landed next to him. The boy tricked me. He made me give way to an anger issue and tried to make me open to an attack, and that was one hell of an attack. But when did he plan all of it? Holding 2 bells to the masked nin's face, he turned to see the team appear to his side and the blonde sit next to him on a scorched rock with a piece of grass protruding from his mouth. Have you arrived to retrieve Squad 7's play toy, Sandaime-sama? Kakashi lay there in agony, lacking the energy to move. We passed, I say. I need to take a nap now that even depleted my energy. I'm so ashamed of everything I did. It was intended as a last resort, so perhaps I should make fewer of those. Just be careful not to make it too small because I was worried that it wouldn't be enough. What if I used a wind dragon missile in place of the Daitapa, or if I used it in combination with the storm dragon instead of just regular black rain to add more concussive force? Well, this taught me something new. Fire is a temperamental ally. I still never got to use the last phase of my plan. Oh well, before Naruto's teammates could return to the village, the Hokage grabbed him and a clone grabbed Kakashi. As he fell forward, they were taken to a hospital. Naruto listened to the recording of his teammates and his Junin sensei explaining what had transpired on the training field while he sat in the Hokage's office. It even managed to capture the Banshee's extremely annoying voice, which was a surprisingly good quality for a recording device. The idea made Naruto wince. I wonder how much it is messing with the stabilizer to capture that perfect pitch. It could cause songbirds to burst from high octaves. The Sandaime had a nightmare trying to brush this off as a new explosive made from Enbu explosive core for destroying enemy camps, but he looked at the boy who appeared to be unaware of his team's testimony against him. Fortunately, they had purchased it. As the young ninja sat there writing off his ability to cover for him as something that would help him again, the old man sighed and stroked his beard. He was unable to save the boy, and this time the council was out for blood. Although it was a difficult decision, he had to decide whether to save the boy or condemn him to the moment. Naruto, you need to gift me with your undivided attention. It's been 3 days since your supposed coup, as every civilian is putting it. The ninja are not exactly at peace either, so I have argued your part to the council and have their verdict. It's not light. The brunette looked at him while the elderly gentleman grumbled. Gigi has never appeared so elderly. Is it his work that is wearing him down, or is it his trust in me? Maybe it's the council he must deal with. This news must be terrible in any case. What could it be? Execution, community service, house arrest, prison, or psychological evaluation? Naruto, they have decided 6 months imprisonment in Fire Country Prison, another 6 months of house arrest, then depending on your team's mindset on whether or not they will allow you to come back to the team. The man stopped when he noticed the blonde. Prison, house arrest? Naruto asked, glancing at the elderly man. When the old man explained that he would be escorted by 2 Junin to gather his belongings from his home, he was permitted to bring a knapsack to the prison of personal effects, where the rest would be stored until his 6 months were up. After that, he would be transferred to a new apartment where a detachment of the Anbu selection would be chosen at random to watch by weeks for the 6 months he would be there. Naruto paid little attention. They finally got me a year in a small cell in my terrible apartment. Fire Country's prison, a few belongings that could fit in a knapsack. The man babbled that the daimyo's laws permitted him to have up to 4 visitors per week, so why a prison first? What laws were in effect here? What were the parameters of his stay? Why not a year of house arrest, or why house arrest and not a full year of prison? He would not survive this and not expect to be casually accepted by his classmates. He understood what force was at work here. He knew Haruno would not keep her mouth shut. Does my boy Naruto understand? The old ninja nodded as he moved aside and watched the boy go, questioning whether he had done the boy any justice at all. Hokage-sama, I will leave to be prepared for my travels. The boy nodded, and the Hokage recoiled at the expression in his eyes, the same one he had when he attempted suicide not long ago. 3 hours later, a large scarred man with a bandana wrapped around his head secured the last folder and sealed it away. As Naruto stood outside his apartment with a bag on his back, he nodded to the blonde, who turned and marched away towards the gate while the man held tight to the boy's belongings. He marched until he came across a small armored carriage with 2 prison Anbu guarding it. The guards stood like statues, and he noticed that their uniforms were different. Instead of Anbu swords, they had clubs hanging on their backs and 2 pouches that Naruto had no idea what they held. They also had a golden C on the temples and a small flame insignia in a birdcage set in their masks. Is this the transport prisoner? Is he only a child? One of the guards said. Naruto's head snapped to him as he heard the metallic voice coming out. Voice disguising machine. Perhaps a jutsu or a natural substance. I don't feel chakra fluctuating. The big man behind him snorted. You both came by the western roads? This Genin's battle strategy created that ash-filled hole. One of the 2 turned back to face the blonde and regarded his hand as though counting fingers, while the other moved forward and took his bag, securing it in a trunk on the back of the carriage that drains chakra. She was going to follow the 2 until the big one called him. Naruto turned and saw the elderly man, his 2 advisors who had once been his teammates, Kakashi on crutches, Sakura with a bandaged arm, and Sasuke staring at him as though he was unable to fully identify him. Hey kid, look behind you, some people to see you off apparently. Team 8 had also arrived. Kiba appeared to be there to make fun of him, Shino appeared composed, and the Hyuga said, Hinata, her name is Hinata. She appeared concerned about him, but he dismissed it, believing he was misinterpreting her. Their sensei stood behind them, staring at him icily, and he shrugged before turning to face the final group. When Iruka, the ramen stand people, and the Hokage's grandson and his friends appeared frightened, Konohamaru shook his head and turned to face the elderly man and his advisors, who approached him first. The man snorted before the woman said, he's going to prison, not a camp. Naruto nodded and reached to embrace the elderly man, while the guards waited to shackle him until he left the village. Naruto, I know this is hard, but you must understand there are consequences to your actions. You will be marched back to this gate in 6 months, as I hope to see you much calmer and just as healthy. Naruto, you are my grandson in everything in blood, the old man whispered in his ear as he held him close. Look to the lining of the pack, there's Ryo sewn in. You can use it when you get back, and a small scroll is in the loaf of bread. It contains enough books to continue your search. Naruto nodded slowly, wanting to cry, but his throat was too badly injured to let out that sound or anything louder than medium volume of conversation. He removed his headband and handed it to the elderly man, who nodded. When you return. Team 7 came next. Sakura whispered to him, I hope prison does something to fix your sick sense of humor, you bastard. He pretended that the insult had struck his heart, but then he made a snapping, biting motion at her, making her jump. Sasuke, HNNED, and waved him away before crossing his arms at the blonde. His teacher stumbled forward, frowning under his mask. Well, Naruto, I can genuinely state that none of the teams I have had have advanced to your group's level, and none of the members were sent to prison less than a week later. Your team will train with me while you're away, but once your prison term is up, you'll be performing missions under constant supervision from a Junin or higher. Hopefully, this leave will help you regain your composure and allow you to reflect on what you believe is right and acceptable. Naruto gave him a nod before turning to face the next group. When Team 8 turned to face him, Kiba laughed and said, "It's the academy again." The blonde had another really long time out. Naruto hissed like a cat, and Kiba's sensei grabbed him out of the air and dragged him away as he swore at the blonde. Shino stepped forward and bowed his head, stating that he understood the academy's reactions and did not hold him ill because of them, and he followed his sensei, and the dog boy Hinata glanced at him, then blushed and played with her index fingers, ushering them forward. As the younger girl sobbed in her father's shoulder, the ramen people wept for him and said that things wouldn't be the same without him. The Konohamaru Corps approached and said that they couldn't have a prisoner as their boss. He nodded and threw his goggles to Konohamaru, declaring that he was now in charge. They fled, unaware of the gift they had received, howling like little kids do. When Hinata finally approached him and walked closer, he noticed that she was shivering. She must be cold or afraid. I don't think this is fair to her, this does not seem right. Naruto stopped her, pulled off his jacket, wrapped it around her, and pulled the hidden hood above and over her head, watching as she turned tomato red and began to sway before he caught her by her shoulders. He gave her a quick hug and felt 2 envelopes pass into his pockets as she turned and fled, and he shed a tear as he watched her run away from him, unnoticed by anyone but the Hokage and his instructor. He turned and walked away to the guards, who searched him thoroughly for weapons but found none. After being hoisted onto the carriage's top and dropped into the pitch-black darkness, the guards grabbed the front and fled as the sun was sinking. He gritted his teeth as he watched the village vanish into the evening's blue and violet skies through a hole in the wall. Then he sat down and hung his head in tears as the wheels swiftly took him away from the only house he had ever known. Since he had left the carriage at the base of the mountain, Naruto had been keeping a careful count of his steps as he ascended the blistered and warped stone stairs to the top. 21,202, 21,203, 21,204. Wait, what is that? Naruto stopped, and his escort stopped as well. All of the prisoners noticed this while climbing. A scene from hell was visible across the valley, with the charred fried husks of several villages and a castle, nearly unrecognizable in the snow that engulfed the mountain. Higher up, he could see the weakened arches and ruins of what may have been a grand stone temple, as well as the outline of what appeared to be an iron and wooden gate that could have allowed someone to roll the entire village into its enormous doors. Naruto listened to the deep, melodious rumble from the nearby mountain, and flinched when he saw balls of fire splatter out of the mountain, and he recoiled when the fire was extinguished by a cold wind. Where is that? Naruto turned to the opposite mountain as the guard spoke and responded, and he flinched when he realized how much colder the voice seemed on this barren mountain. One of the guards shook his head and laughed, and the other spoke in that metallic voice. The monastery of Our Blessed Lady Mito, the first container, is located on Mount Haro, the home of Kyuubi no Kitsune, the nine-tailed beast. The villages surrounding the mountain were populated by people who came to mine the mountain or explore the ruins that begin there and extend to the summit. Because she held the Kyuubi for the majority of her life, if not all of it, the people in this area regard her as their blessed savior. About 50 years ago, it was a center of activity. However, when the people dug too deep into the mountain and discovered that the Kyuubi had rested there in search of objects of power, they discovered the core. The cold winds of this area unknowingly reactivated the dormant volcano, causing it to erupt, destroying the villages and covering any entrance to the upper reaches of the monastery, where Lady Mito's ruins are supposedly entombed. At the behest, numerous people have attempted to explore the area, but it is impossible due to the large number of wildlife and bandits that inhabit it on the outside. Naruto nodded, but his thoughts were racing. It's a sad, lonely place. The guard tapped the boy who turned back to face him and said, "So that's the Kyuubi's home, the spirit that my body plays host to. I wonder how far I could get up the mountain before I was forced to turn back. I never knew there was a container before me. Maybe that monastery could answer some of the questions I have about the extent of what my body has changed to house the beasta. I wonder what it's like in the monastery, or what those villages hold, or if Kyuubi kept anything in the caverns it once inhabited. I don't know what you did, kid, but nobody should have to go there. As you are aware, this prison drugs inmates who are too dangerous for their own good and drops them off in one of the villages early in the morning. They never make it as the beast's chakra replenishes it in ways we cannot comprehend. The warden occasionally sends really bad inmates there to mine minerals for the Land of Fire." Naruto nodded and followed one of the guards as they continued to walk the path to the top, thinking now of how he would find a way in there. If some can't serve their sentence, we send them there with either 3 shuriken or kunai, and if they can make it off the mountain we pardon them completely, but it's suicide, soon, very soon. After 4 hours the guard nodded, and the other ushered Naruto inside. Naruto approached the big iron door that shut the prison and saw the door bars on either side. Well, no one ever escapes it seems, he thought, shivering as he realized he had once again given away his jacket and that his orange pants seemed to absorb every cold gust. The castle's interior had clearly been renovated, as the main hall was filled with people shackled to the walls by nailed shackles. Some appeared to be starving, others battered, and one, who appeared to be 90, was being verbally and physically abused by a large, muscular guard. The old man coughed as the guard's meaty fist struck his thin frame, causing him to make horrible wheezing noises. Naruto pulled away from his escort and ran to the guard. "You old man. You are always being so much trouble. No respect to guards trying to instill riots in the prisoners sabotaging patrols. You would be luckier if you just died." The two attempted to stop him, but he had already crossed the room, picked up a flaming brand, and swung wide, catching the giant man in the lower back where the hip's ball joint rested. The man screamed as Naruto dropped the brand, grabbed the man's shirt neck, and started punching the whimpering man, attracting the attention of the guards and other prisoners, who hurried to help their fellow. His escort attempted to pull him off, but not before he grabbed the man's club and swung it into his shoulder with a meaty thud. The guards dragged him away as he attempted to kick the man who had fallen before being pulled out of range. He was pushed into a room after being frogged. Marched from the main hall to a more opulent area of the castle, where he saw an older man talking to 6 other recently arrived inmates. The man gave him a sidelong glance and moved aside as he was flung to the others. "Welcome to the Land of Fire's National Seclusion Rehabilitation Center, the prison known for being the safest, most secure, and most successful." "That's what I was saying before I was rudely interrupted. Don't let our name deceive you. This is a prison. While you are here to help repay society for your transgressions, you will work for your fortune at daimyo. Other than your guards, nobody here has any special privileges. There will be breakfast, work, lunch, more work, and dinner after you are awakened by the bell in the morning or the guards club if you feel too sleepy. After that, you'll be led back to your own cell and given until the last bell to do as you please. You will be marched to showers each day. After dinner there is no hot or warm water. After repeated use, the nervous system is shut down, making the cold less noticeable. Therefore, embrace it and don't bitch." As one of the guards approached and whispered in his ear, the man stopped walking, took a letter, tore it open with a flourish, read the scrawl, and called out without raising his head. "Uzumaki of Konoha, step forward," Naruto said as the warden looked up and shook his head. "You have attacked a guard, and if it wasn't bad enough for you, your sentence has been changed by the council of your village. You no longer have house arrest but a full year here." Despite feeling a chill creep up his spine, Naruto nodded, and the warden tossed him his packed knapsack, which he slung over his shoulder while the guards handed out their bags. "All that is permitted in your cells are your bags. No cash or weapons are permitted. The nuns from the monastery at the foot of the mountain will distribute the medication. The guards will watch you take your filled prescription and then check your mouth to make sure it went down. Women are housed in the east and south wings, while men are housed in the west and north wings. You are not allowed to wear civilian clothing during prison hours. Instead, you must wear whatever the prison seamstress gives you in your cells. You can walk around naked for all we care. The central tower houses the guards' barracks and my office. Lunch carts pass through during the midday hours, and food is distributed according to work quantity through cells for breakfast and dinner. Now pick up your shit and go to the woman at the end of the room, standing by the furs." The seamstress examined the 7 of Tama, 2 women and 5 Mina, and gave them clothes, heavy fur coats, thick leather pants, and shirts. They were also given the option of belts or hoods, and leather boots were provided at the end. The woman chose hoods after looking through their bags, and the men chose belts if they had them or hoods if they did. Naruto chose a hood after noting what was in his pack. They undressed beside one another, and the guards patted them down for weapons, looking for bruises, scars, or past injured limbs. The women were groped, but no one responded to their outbursts, and the men frowned as one of the guards kneed a man, making him double over, saying, "Bastards, they're people, they deserve some respect." They saw Naruto's markings, one guard cursing, until he gave up trying to copy them all and simply sprayed him with ink and pressed him against paper, creating crude copies of his markings. Naruto flinched as the ink sank into his scar tissue and turned all of his questions black, but he said nothing. The guard nodded in admiration, but the one behind him struck him, startling him and causing him to cry out in pain. The guard snorted, "He can speak just fine." The warden ordered them to get dressed. Feeling that the pants were just the right amount of snug, Naruto put them on. He then put on the wool spun shirt and the heavy fur jacket, but when he turned around, he saw that it was much too big. Naruto removed the fur and strode over to the woman, who had been given a slightly thinner and smaller fur coat. She smiled and exchanged coats with him, while the other woman swayed suggestively and the men nodded their approval before they were each led away to their cell. After dark, the north wing. When Naruto entered his cell, He was truly taken aback by how much better it was than he had anticipated. A desk, a wooden stool, a small end table, and a cot with chains hanging from the wall were all present, and Naruto started working. He opened his pack and checked the contents. He had never found so much useful stuff in one location. He quickly made a list. He had bandages, an antiseptic, a hook needle, and gut. He placed those in the far back of his end table. He had a thick brown belt, which he put aside, a set of old leather boots similar to the ones that were given to him, a cake of soap, a loaf of bread and some dried food items, a pen and a packet of paper. He placed the paper and pen on the desk with the scrolls, and everything else in its proper place. He nodded and looked out the window. He nodded and dragged himself into the bed, holding the 2 papers from the Hyuga and the scroll concealed beneath a loose stone of the windowsill. As he struck a match, lit a candle, and started reading, he had a perfect view of Mount Harrow and all its villages as well as the monastery. To Naruto-kun, I don't pretend to know what your life is like, but I do know that it's not as bad as many people think. I've seen you smile, and I've seen you dance when you feel like you're alone. Naruto stopped there. She knew more than most people, and he didn't think anyone knew he could dance. I've always admired you, respected you, and even considered being next to you. I know you like music and puzzles, but I must admit that I don't know everything. I don't understand why you feel that you have to pull your opponent close to you in order to defeat them with sheer force and energy. I don't understand why you feel that asking yourself questions doesn't bring you any peace. I don't understand why you feel that you have to injure yourself in order to find the answers. What do you envision for yourself in the future? Do you see love? Do you see a family? Can you see yourself taking care of yourself while you take care of them? I know you will be gone for a while, but I want you to know that you will not be forgotten. I worry about you. What will happen if you are not given peace? From the Hyuga clan's Hinata. After setting the letter aside, Naruto would be remembered by the attractive girl who had captured his attention. However, he was unsure of what she needed from him and what he could offer her in exchange. But I will protect her till I know what must be done, he said, scowling at the other envelope before opening it. My mother once told me that these pictures would help me in my goal, so I want to give them to you even though I'm sorry I couldn't be of more assistance to you when you needed someone, Naruto-kun said. Hinata setting the letters aside, Naruto took out 3 pictures. One of the girl in a sundress kneeling among lovely flowers and reading to them. Another of her sitting beside a lake with a butterfly in her cupped hands. Her face flushed a deep shade of red as she looked at the camera. And the last one made his heart race. He saw her sitting in her room, wearing a small red dress that left little room for his imagination regarding her cleavage, and she was blushing while holding a fan to cover her face. After giving himself a nod and slipping the pictures under his pillow, Naruto turned over and fell asleep, drifting off to sleep amid its folds in a peaceful, warm blackness. 3 months. During the next few months, Naruto put in a lot of work, pushing his body until his old muscle mass was gone and an iron body replaced it. He was able to lead the prison's oxen by himself and assist the weaker and more vulnerable in finishing their tasks as best he could without realizing it. He was gradually gaining recognition from most of the inmates, and they started to view him as one of their own. 4 months. Naruto, who had grown 3 inches during his stay here, sat propped up against the food wagon and watched as a limping guard made another cruel remark to one of the elderly men, throwing muddy snow in his face and causing his food to fall to the cold snow. The elderly man cried as the guard left, only to have a grinny blonde boy bring him his stew, lift his yoke and his own, and proceed up the path. 8 months. Sitting on the edge of the prison wall, Naruto watched as some of the guards laughed at the tale of one of them having exploited a new female inmate. Naruto snarled and gripped his spade, which he had been using to reset mortar for the new wall, and looked at it, then down at the guard, before standing up after making sure the guard was facing the opposite way. His fellow inmates watched as he crept down the wall, dropping occasionally to avoid the guard's sight, until the guard was far enough away to be invisible to the other guards. He waited as he approached the ledge and started smoking. Naruto whirled the spade around so he now held it like a dagger and watched the man turn a corner, dropping to the snow. Avoiding the loud cobblestones, he hurried in a crouched walk after the guard and sprung to an alcove, keeping easy view of the black silhouette in the snow. The guard's spine was severed when Naruto rushed forward to stab him in the lower back with the spade, then kicked him off the mountain. Watching as his body fell to the icy depths, he turned to see 2 guards running at him, while his fellow inmates watched from the top of the walls. When the first guard swung his club in a vicious vertical strike, he jumped back and kicked the man in the head, causing him to fall on his back dazed. The next guard then swung sideways, which Naruto parried with his spade, head-butted the man, grabbed his shoulders, and landed backwards on his back, launching the man in the same direction his predecessor had gone to the valley. Naruto kicked the man's wrist, causing the club to fall from his hand and land in his spare hand, causing it to sweep down on the man's knee, causing him to cry out as he fell to one knee. Naruto then drove the spade into the man's jugular and side threw him off the cliff as well. The dazed man stood now and ran at the blonde and swung sideways at him. With his hands raised in triumph, Naruto turned to face his fellow inmates. They whispered about the alleged miracle the blonde had performed for them, and Naruto then started telling stories about the Land of Fire's prison and its own ferocious shadow. Over the course of the following few months, rumors of an assassin spread throughout the prison's population, stating that if you were having problems with a guard and had nothing to do, you only needed to see an elderly man who was watching over the supply route and was accompanied by a boy who carried it past his and the man's points. According to the arrangement, the old man would free you from the fear of a guard by having the assassin pay a visit to the guard. However, the inmates proudly wore the burns, and those the assassin had aided came forward whenever a guard was discovered dead or missing. The guards tried to put an end to these rumors, and the old man was always in a different location, always with that little boy who would let him rest while people talked to him about their problems. Eventually, the guards started branding the inmates as a warning that the suffering would continue if the guards continued to vanish. 11 months sitting in his cell, Naruto wrote a letter to Hinata, explaining his self-imposed mission to help the people, their individual flights, and the system he had established with the old man. He had started writing a few weeks prior and had only recently started to receive his responses through a birdwatcher who oversaw the guard's watchtower. A tall guard entered and stood on the side of the door, followed by his friend the old man, and Naruto halted when he heard a key in his cell door. He reached under his desk and grabbed the Iwa arrowhead he had discovered. "I can tell you're working late into the night, Naruto. My boy, how do you feel about the suffering of our fellow humans today?" As the guard shut the door and kept an eye on the corridor, the man inquired. The old man sighed as the boy turned to face him more directly. "Master Kilvin, anger keeps a body warm in the night, and the promise of greatly deserved justice can drive one to do amazing things." "Well spoken, my boy. I recall that when I first heard about your adventures in this gloomy place, you had a gift for eliminating people I hadn't seen in Ursa not since I was a little child and was beginning to learn the ropes from my father and brother." The old man sighed again, and Naruto rubbed his arm as the man by the door bowed. "Then my heart beat cold when they said they captured you and branded you." Naruto's adventures had taken a violent turn during the time leading up to his capture, and they burned a brand of a large black spiral into his lower back and both shoulders. His arms and torso had grown very muscular during this time, and his questions had become more thorough. Naruto looked down at them and said, "I have Master Kilvin to thank for answering so many of my questions, and in turn I have become an extension of his arm, to help him dish justice to this corrupt prison system. A fitting deal." "You have a new assignment, Master?" The man gave a solemn nod. With a sigh of relief, the man stood up, and Naruto stepped forward to steady him. "Naruto, you are to go forward and take out each captain of the towers. The warden is to retire soon, and we cannot allow his successor to be picked from those corrupt souls. You will have to work all night." Naruto nodded. "Naruto, you are my son in every way. Please take this map and this letter." Naruto nodded as he stepped around the man and reached for his fur coat, but the old man stopped him. "When you are free, go to Mount Harrow. Underneath the stone steps of the monastery, you will find the weapons of my family's trade. They will help you in your life." As the candlelight went out, Naruto reached for the man at the door, who was wearing a dark winter owl feather cowl and a snow bear pelt coat. "No, my boy, you will be wearing that on this trip," he said, pointing behind Naruto. On the summit of the central castle's tower later that night, the leader of the East Tower, Naruto, was a black shadow in the moonlight. Looking down at his target, he was inspecting the castle to increase his chances of becoming the warden, and he looked to the tiled roof, praying to Kami that he would not be killed, before leaping to the roof. "I have to beat the snow off the roof, if not it will alert him and draw his attention to my attack." "Faster, faster!" Naruto sped forward even faster. Seeing the edge of the roof approaching, he took a deep breath and threw himself forward, using a chimney as a springboard and jumping to the edge, catching the edge and ripping an icicle from its perch and swung, launching himself to the man's position. He hit the roof with a crashing thud and rolled with the landing, running like a man possessed. As he rubbed his arms and felt the chilling cold swirl in the night air, the captain spat at the frozen ground and allowed his thoughts to drift to a warm bed. A moment later, something fell on him, shattering both of his shoulders and sending a sharp point into his ear canal, which pierced his skull and killed him. A second after glancing at his work, Naruto turned and fled into the night as all the snow fell off the roof onto the still warm corpse. In the guard outpost that is farthest away, the captain of the West Tower was sleeping soundly when Naruto entered through the arrow window and left a moment later, with a nasty twist on the captain's neck. In the torture rooms for women, when Naruto looked again, He saw the captain of the South Tower pull out a blazing hot poker from a brazier and whistle as he approached a 16-year-old girl who was pleading with him to stop. Naruto started to gradually gain leverage by shifting the chandelier with his body back and forth, then slamming a foot down to tear its iron peg from the ceiling, causing it to fall, shocking the guard and the captive. "What the fuck? Oh my god, it's you. Assassin, please don't kill me," the man started to scream, but Naruto grabbed him and slammed him into the brazier, causing the facial lotions he had been using to make his face look good for the presentation the following day to catch fire and cause him to scream aloud. Naruto then grabbed a big forge hammer from next to an anvil and brought it down, crushing the man's head like a grape. The young woman on the wall looked at him and sighed, and he turned to her, ripping the lock from the rusted wall shackles and helping her to her feet. "Who are you?" Naruto shook his head and fled into the room's shadows after glancing at the woman and letting her see the deep blue eyes beneath his cowl. In the warden's office, standing before his warden, the North Tower captain listened to the old man's tirade about how much he detested the sickly man and how the guards could not wait for him to retire. "At this rate, we won't have a new warden and I'll be replaced by a diplomatic soldier who must run to his superiors for a damned answer to everything. 3 captains will be dead in a matter of hours. This is not possible. If I have to replace myself with a custodian, I will retire, damn it. Sir, why don't you let me be the warden tonight and let you leave the haunted hell tonight?" the captain said, clearing his throat before speaking in a honey voice as he considered what the captain had said. The warden started to nod at himself. He looked up to respond, but instead he screamed in disgust and horror at what he saw. The warden started to scream, but a piece of paper dropped to the desk, and he grabbed it without thinking. The captain had a knife in his skull, and his own sword was in his groin, holding him off the ground with its blade in his knees. The old man gave him a list of names, which the warden nodded to and started writing to his new successor, a just and moral lieutenant who had saved a village from pirate raids. "Either choose a new warden, one of peaceful disposition and kind heart, or you will find that old age won't matter to your death. Here are some recommendations." In his cell again, the old man had fallen asleep in the chair at his desk when Naruto entered his cell and stopped. He grinned and pulled his big coat over the old man until he noticed 3 new things on his desk: the map, a letter of gratitude from the inmates, and the letter the old man had given him. He brushed the dirt from the old man's beard before stopping. Naruto, who had just lost his only father figure, threw his coat away from the elderly man and gathered him into his arms, saying, "Master, breathing is rather long-winded." "Wait, he isn't breathing at all." The old man had no heartbeat, and Naruto was silent as tears streamed down his face. The inmates had ears only for the cries of a boy for his father and a hand that had lost its body, so they were unable to hear the howling winds that night. After a month, after a year, Naruto was free to stand on the prison's front gate. He had 2 weeks to return to Konoha and rejoin Team 7, so he steeled his eyes and headed for Mount Harrow in the distance, walking the steps with the assurance of someone who had walked their frozen surfaces countless times before. And moving quickly over the snow dunes, he stopped to drink water and urinate behind a tree, but he kept going until the sun disappeared from the sky. Slowly, Naruto ascended the almost imperceptible steps leading to the monastery. He had already passed 2 towns and 6 that had once been towns but had been completely destroyed by the elements. He had rummaged through the wreckage and discovered a few hairs and flints, but not much else. He skinned the hairs and used the fur to insulate his boots. He proceeded and paused, looking to his right. A life-size statue of the demon Kyuubi, in all its flaming splendor, stood there. It was clearly made of onyx and red-veined material from the mountain to appease the spirit and warn people away from the great door that likely led to the beast's den. Naruto shivered at the evil look in its eyes. No creature in Kami's domain had eyes like that, and he stopped and turned, scowling and setting his pack down before removing the Iwa arrowhead from his belt and crouching, daring them to initiate contact. 3 more wolves quickly followed, and the other 2 backed away gradually until they were far enough away that they turned and fled as well. Naruto watched the wolves run, but one of them froze a few feet away and fled as if struck soundly. As he continued past the statue, heading toward his objective, Naruto thought, "They smell blood and the iron of the prison. They have taught themselves to fear these things, noble intentions for wild creatures." He halted and, after failing the hand seals 9 or 10 times, finally managed to make a tiny wisp of fire pass by his nude hands, warming them. Or they perceive the existence of a considerably more powerful and destructive being, to whom they ought to submit and struggle. Naruto stopped when he saw the statue's eyes turn blood red before returning to their original black and red hue. After circling the statue and failing to notice any change, he proceeded to examine the door, which was obviously a futile attempt. "Looks so much like chakra, but it couldn't be. Chakra would have dissipated from so much time. I wonder if it's some sort of seal." The door was made of great blackened iron with ebony bands, and it was locked in the center with a stark white spiral that glistened with a light blue hue. He shook his head, looked up at the white spiral, and put his pack down again. He grabbed a handhold in the wall and scaled it up to the spiral, then closed his eyes and placed his hand on the white lock. He felt immediately that something was draining his chakras. He soon fell from the perch he had found and hit the ground with a much darker, more violent red chakra that caused the stone to flare and spin, as well as a groove behind the stone that had what could only be a very special keyhole. Another question. Damn it, I hope to find answers here. Fuck. Naruto roared, made hand signals, and let a fire dragon missile slam into the door, which absorbed the blast without any problems but glowed red at the center. Then he heard a call from the center. Naruto stood with a tense back and glared at the thing. Naruto looked at the door and felt foolish because he had no idea what to say to the inanimate object. So he just shook his head and went back up to the mountain, completely bewildered. I open only for the Supreme Beast, and those WHO have inherited the faith of the first. So a container finally decided to find the roots of his predecessors instead of arrogantly demanding whatever it is he wants. This young man may be interesting. The blonde's great eye opened in his head at the sound of its home, and it closed as he felt them walk out the door. I don't have any way that would allow me to continue. I would need something that would allow me to grind all this to dust and still not affect the integrity of the walls around this. Naruto scowled at this before he stepped back outside and took out the map his master had given him. Naruto soon found his way to the monastery's feet and marveled at the sheer brilliance of what it must have once been. He climbed the steps and reached the door and opened it to find rubble blocking the underground tunnel. Let's see, 4 steps to the left, 2 up, and 6 over, last step on this level. Naruto walked to one of the few remaining steps, gripped it tightly, and yanked it out of its frosted sheath in the ground. He saw papers, a purse full of large, shiny gold coins, and 2 blades. A dagger that was perhaps as large as a man's hand but was straight and double-bladed with a gilded silver handguard, a well-worked leather grip, and a pommel that was identical to the one on the axe. Naruto grinned, hung the axe from his belt, attached the knife to his forearm beneath his coat, and then turned and left the mountain. In Konoha, sitting on a log, Hinata Hyuga read the last letter she had received from Naruto, whose calligraphy was always so fluid and perfect. She felt his warmth as he wrote down his feelings about the passing of his only real father-like figure. She shed a tear for him. She was breathless when he told her that he had helped free the prison from the oppressive guards. She read that he had said that his body had changed from its previous level due to hard labor. She got a little nosebleed at the thought when he mentioned that he would be in Konoha in 2 weeks after running an errand. She jumped with joy, frightening Kiba, Kurenai, and Shino with the outburst. They exchanged glances and then approached her. Hey Hinata, how are you? You've spent the entire day sitting here reading that letter, and we really want to know what the good news is. Shino nodded. Yes, Kurenai said, nodding as she attempted to read the addressee of the letter. Hinata blushed as she glanced at them, saying, oh. The team moaned once more as Kiba marched off to destroy a post. Kurenai returned to reviewing mission reports, and Shino approached Hinata. It's just that Team 7 will be whole again, and the Ruru Rookie Ni 9 will be complete again. Is it accurate to presume that you have maintained communication with Naruto throughout this entire period? Shino nodded and started to leave, but paused and turned back to Hinata after Hinata gave a feeble nod. Hinata nodded stupidly, wondering if that was the most she had ever heard the boy say at once. I would like to spar with him in taijutsu once again. I have been preparing to be better suited in that area with the help of you and Kiba, and I would like to see how I measure against someone who is truly gifted in the ninja arts without constant training. When she saw that today was the day he had stated he would arrive, she quickly said goodbye and rushed in the direction of the gate. Alongside Team 7, he jumped higher and released a small water dragon jutsu, washing them both away, and he turned to see Sakura attempting to help Sasuke up, but he waved her away as they checked themselves for injuries. Kakashi dodged as Sakura threw a kunai and Sasuke performed a sliding kick, causing him to be glanced by one of his hidden knife traps. Kakashi sighed and gestured for them to approach him, saying, they have come a long way in a year, 74 D ranks, 19 C ranks. I guess they will realize that the team will be complete soon and we will have to work on teamwork to factor in the blonde's tank-like methods. Tower of Hokage. A messenger flew toward Sarutobi. As he looked up he checked, grinned, and held up his crystal ball, saying, let's see if Naruto has become any different besides what he said in his letters. The main gate. At the gate, Hinata tried to catch a glimpse of Naruto but couldn't find anyone who looked even remotely like the blonde she knew. In her excitement, she almost knocked someone over, but she stopped when his pack fell off his back. When she saw the person's face framed by blonde hair, she looked up and turned a bright red. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen. It's just that this is supposed to be the homecoming of someone very important to me. I hope to see him soon. She recognized him as her Naruto. He was taller, clearly more muscular from the way his clothes fit him. He had long, ponytailed hair in the back, with a single braid on the right side framing his face. His whiskers were more prominent due to the weather he had been in. His body was covered in what appeared to be bare skin, held in place by a thick belt. He wore tall leather boots that resembled Tinker's, and she noticed that he was grinning. "Well, Lady Hyuga, I know it's been a while, but I'm back, and I really value the extended written correspondence. Would you please treat me to dinner once I'm settled in?" Did Naruto really just ask me out? Oh Kami, please don't be a dream, please be real. Oh god, it is real. I got a date with Naruto-kun. Hinata looked at him, wondering if she had heard him correctly. Naruto rushed forward as she fainted, his face flushed, and he smiled the biggest smile he had ever seen. As he marched through the middle of the street toward the tower, Naruto could almost feel the feeling of hatred, a cold, tempered hatred that hung like a guillotine on the chopping block, silent just before the drop, even though new businesses had appeared during the year. Not much has changed. The anger, the sadness, the never-ending blame is still there, but I am better suited for it now. My master did not leave this world without teaching his proto-copyright ga copyright some things. This village is like an ecosystem. Some people are directly impacted by others, and those who are impacted collectively have an impact on others. This is a question and an answer, two sides of the same coin, question and answer, lie and truth, sorrow and happiness, unity and anarchy. There are so many unanswered questions that it's practically teasing the idea of hunting them down. Naruto paused to look at the source of the sound. "So are you awake, Lady Hinata?" he questioned the piggybacking moving body. As he reached the entrance to the Hokage's tower, Naruto became excited. Yes, I believe so. I had such an interesting dream," he said. "Oh? Really? Please explain to Lady Hinata what it was about, Naruto-kun," he said as he opened the door. "About me. I also noticed the suffix. It's interesting, but not shocking, that he's been writing to me for a year, about me. What was it about?" As he waved to a clan head who was gaping at him, he asked. "About you. No, it was about Naruto-kun. Well, that is my name, or part of it at least." Hinata opened her eyes, notably unblurred by her clan's bloodline, and saw a braided knot and whisker next to her face. She looked around and emitted a sudden eep, remembering only that she was being carried by Naruto and that all she could remember was fainting. "Why am I being carried, Naruto?" "Well, you seem to have been rendered unconscious after I proposed," Naruto said, looking over his shoulder at the girl with the indigo hair. "Proposed what? Oh god, what happened? Is this a dream? That we share a meal together? You never did answer me though." She nodded as it returned to her. Then she realized how this must appear. As she disembarked, Naruto nodded and knelt down, missing the warmth of her private carriage instantly. "Hi, I accept graciously, but could you put me down? I feel fine." Naruto bowed and looked at her. A number of villagers grinned at her positive attitude as she returned to the training ground. "Thank you for the acceptance. I will chat with you later after I get my affairs in order, and we'll see to dinner." She nodded as he turned and went to the stairs to the Hokage's office, leaving her feeling a little dizzy as she took to her head everything she had witnessed, before bowing to the person holding the door and leaving, cheering to herself. Entering the Hokage waiting room, Naruto opened the door and proceeded to the secretary, halting just short of her desk. After thinking the blonde had died, the secretary nodded and said, "I am here to see the Hokage, if he is not previously engaged." She then went into his office. She motioned for him to come in, and after he had done so, she stood there trembling and made a valiant effort to slowly regain her balance and comprehend what had just happened. In the office of the Hokage, when the young man walked in and sat in the chair across from him, Sarutobi turned to face him. He was calm and collected, with no sign of his vivacious personality. "How are you, Naruto, my boy?" the seasoned ninja leader asked, taking his time to observe the blonde. He was a healthy weight now, and from the leader's point of view, he appeared to be in perfect physical condition. His eyes were darker, but they had a tempered coldness that the old man could only imagine being unnerving if turned to an enemy. He wore a large pelt coat with a hood pulled down around his neck, and his feet were covered by strong leather boots that were crossed in the blonde's lap. The Hokage nodded, sensing that the blonde had grown even more independent in his journey back to the village. "Lord Hokage, I am still alive, sounder temperament and in good health." As he lit up his pipe, the man nodded at the blonde and said, "Your manner of speech has improved. It shows your intellect better. I approve. I have been away much longer than a year, it seems. My master taught me that a man is little more than a beast without a voice to represent himself." The Hokage saw an opportunity and interrupted, "Your master?" The boy nodded. "Master Kilvin. But he seems more like a father to me than anything else. Among other things, he taught me how to speak effectively, how to better manage my energy, and that patience is a valuable tool rather than a hindrance." Sarutobi grinned as he took a file from his desk. Seems your leave was more beneficial than one would have thought. Anything you think I should take note of before you are given your housing assignment, and return to ninja assignments? The child nodded. I am more fluid, quicker, and stronger. Both my taijutsu and my knowledge of hand signals have improved. I haven't used jutsus in a year, so my chakra control is lacking. After taking a deep breath, Naruto took a scroll out of his coat and said, "Your books, Hokage-sama." He waved the scroll away and told him to keep it, saying he had copies. Naruto nodded gratefully, noting that he had made notes in the majority of them. He handed the old man his axe and dagger, who examined them and nodded before returning them. He then sat down again, and the two of them sat quietly in the room until he gave the boy 2 pamphlets. I also have replaced my use of kunai for shuriken, and added 2 more weapons to my arsenal. The address for your new apartment is off the main highway, on top of the Shinobi Library. It's a little dark and more like a loft than an apartment, but it complies with safety and living regulations. Give your sensei your ninja reinstatement papers. He remembered the boy's smile, and the man's smile, too. I think you will like it. All right, Naruto, as a worried friend and leader, did your stability grow? Have more of your inquiries been addressed? Are you well enough to resume your duties? The man nodded and excused himself to his paperwork after the boy gave him a look and nodded. When the Hokage beckoned Naruto to stop, he was halfway to the door. Also, here is a monetary bonus so you can be outfitted for duty. Naruto caught the purse that was thrown to him. Oh, and Naruto, the boy said, looking at him and remembering Minato once more. I am glad you're home, my boy. As he nodded, the door was closed. At the loft of Naruto, standing in his loft, Naruto had just concluded a conversation with the library's head, a kind man who only judged him for his love of books. Naruto said he would invite the man to tea and would like to talk about the library membership later. The man promptly accepted and was eager to find out more about the boy. He took a deep breath and grinned, thinking, it would be a nice home. The smells from the bakery next door wafted through the main window. I would be happy here. The loft was big enough for a bed and some furniture, but the bathroom was a little dirty and the kitchenette hadn't seen much use. He took the furs he had gathered and put them out to tan, while he put some aside to sleep on. He opened a closet and discovered 2 more scrolls, one containing all of his writings and the other with furniture. Within 3 hours, the place looked like a much more organized place to live, with the mess of his apartment showing signs of its existence here and there. The refrigerator was filled with food and necessities in the kitchen and the bathroom, and it was time to move forward with organizing his wardrobe. Naruto burned his old orange jumpsuits, checked his turtlenecks and discovered they still fit, even though they were large when he first bought them, and had a lot of ninja pants in different colors from his trip to the clothes store. He also had some warmer shirts made of thinner material for warmer climates, a belt with pouches that he could attach to other belts, and he sat in his only recliner while disassembling his snow bear pelt coat. He finished making new jackets out of the pelt, lining them with snow owl feathers to prevent a cold draft, and sewing black ninja silk onto each to create hoods. He then went to the bathroom and showered, washing off the dirt and mud as he got out and dressed, picking up his papers to give to Kakashi. After a few hours, at Training Ground 14, Naruto stopped abruptly as he was walking through the trees toward his team and jumped high to avoid a sliding kick and a flurry of kunai. He turned to see Sasuke standing on a tree above him. It appears that the Uchiha's outfit hasn't changed. Aside from an extra ninja pouch, he has a little more muscle tone, which is good because he hasn't had much of it this year. One can only speculate as to the new jutsu in his arsenal. Naruto flipped backwards to avoid a fist flying past him and saw Sakura huffing. Significant more muscle tone. Good. Kakashi trained them both. Never was much for jutsu, probably expanded into genjutsu then. He nodded to each of them, receiving a wave and a huff or grunt in return, and watched as they all inspected him, laughing at their surprise. Hello sensei, Sakura, Sasuke. Kakashi was the first to notice Naruto's increased muscle mass, but what really stood out was his outfit change. He wore thin-soled leather boots, charcoal gray ninja pants, a black turtleneck, a slicked pelt jacket with a pulled-down hood, lined with owl feathers, and a blue sash around his waist that held numerous pouches. Looks like a member of Kurenai's tracking team. Interesting. He seems to increase his acuteness of surroundings. Actually a little scary. Nothing will be able to sneak up on him if he has truly improved. Hello Naruto. Am I correct in assuming you are situated and cleared for active duty? He nodded, and Kakashi shed a tiny drop of perspiration. He was a little afraid the blonde would come and murder them all, and he had that new weapon. Why the axe, Dobi? Sasuke nodded as he eyed the axe, noting that it was beautiful but definitely not something he would use because they were ninjas, not woodcutters, going on a killing spree. The blonde laughed as he fingered the blade, and Kakashi saw the slightest drop of blood fall from his finger. Why are you here, Naruto? Team Kakashi is once again complete. I am here to render aid to teammates and sensei, and cut down any enemies of Konoha. Sakura called to him, and he glanced at her before jumping to the ground and making tiny impressions in the dirt. Kakashi grinned and was pleased with the blonde's response. The three nodded and advanced on Kakashi, saying, "Well, this is nice, but it's time to train today's goal. Tag me, no weapons, Naruto no intent to kill, and please no axe." After a few hours, Sasuke was on one knee from his repeated attempts at dropping, Sakura was on her back from her ground approach, and Naruto was standing and observing the three while dragging a whetstone across his axe. Kakashi was standing across from the three genin. Naruto has not diminished, not even tired. He was leaping through the trees like Sasuke was, and sprinting faster than Sakura. He slammed into me like a cannonball after pacing my movements, allowing both teammates to tag me as he held me for that split second, but I don't feel anything but bruises from where he grabbed my torso. His grip is incredible. His axe is a part of his body. He used it to change direction as he was flying through the trees several times. The blonde was heavy too, and fast. Looks like he knew what his body was capable of, but he seems out of use for his jutsu, needs work in chakra control. Sasuke did well. He would have got me if Naruto hadn't blindsided me. Sakura too. They will not have any encumberment with working together. They should get another mission soon, probably C rank. Naruto's new strength would leave any D ranks for conditioning moot. His taijutsu is better as well. Seems he has adopted sweeping punches and short lunge kicks to stun attackers, so he can grapple with them. Somewhat like the Akamichas. The boy is built like a boulder now. Sakura cheered and Sasuke smiled, saying, "Good training team, tomorrow we will get a C rank." Naruto waited for the excitement to subside before responding, saying, "Sensei, I have to go to my father's grave and I have some previous engagements to see too. Can we wait until the end of the week if we haven't accepted a mission yet?" I thought he would welcome the opportunity to go to work, but that's up to your teammates. Naruto, you should check with them. Perhaps they would like to be accounted for. Kakashi stared at him in shock. He knows who his father is. Plus, he has previous engagements. This merits some questions. Naruto addressed them. Sakura interrupted Sasuke, who shrugged his shoulders, saying, "Naruto, I thought you were an orphan. Did you find out who your parents were?" In order to gauge the blonde's reaction, Sasuke and Kakashi turned to face him. "No, I believe that I could choose my own family because I don't have parents. I would like to visit my father's shrine because he was the closest person to me and took care of me while I was incarcerated." Sakura appeared surprised by the response. Sasuke's mouth quirked, and Kakashi hung his head. After all, when one is parentless, there is a void in the heart that must always be filled. We take those we can find to help fill it, or else the grief consumes us. "I'm so sorry, Naruto. We were unaware. Do you want some company? I thought they would hate me, but here they are trying to console me. Have I really expected so little from them? But no, I should pay my respects alone. It's fitting, but I will remember this," Naruto said, looking surprised. Sakura nodded slowly, recalling that Naruto was never really serious unless he spoke in a certain way, and this reverberated with truth just by itself. He shook his head, and Sasuke nodded, saying he would follow Naruto's example and visit his own parents' grave. Kakashi walked and gave Naruto a shoulder pat. "Is this location outside of the village, Naruto?" the blonde asked with a solemn nod. Kakashi let out a sigh. "Then someone would have to accompany you since you just got back in the village recently." "I will go," Naruto gave a nod. The three stared at him in shock at his response. "Thank you, sensei. It would be nice to have an extra blade with me." With a tear in his eye, Naruto turned to face his teammates and asked, "Naruto, where is this shrine?" "It's at the base of Mount Hero." Sakura appeared alarmed as Kakashi's mind raced, and Sasuke glanced at the blonde, saying, "I understand if you don't want to now. Does this imply that he has had a conversation with his tenant, or what?" "No. That prison is for death row inmates, so Hokage-sama would not have sent him there. Was the council even expecting him to live?" "I must be certain." Naruto turned to his sensei and said, "Naruto, I have a question. Where did you get interned?" Kakashi nodded and said, "I will go. You will need my expertise." Naruto nodded, but paused, asking why. "It was at the peak of Mount Rakate." As the other two gazed at their sensei, he said. As he watched the sunset on the training ground, he, Sakura, and Sasuke bathed in light, but the light only reached Naruto's neck, and his face was clouded in shadow. "Because I owe you an apology, and I want to pay my respects to the man who made you the person you have become. And because I owe you an apology for not being there and for losing control, and as a way of repaying your real father." The following day at the village gate, as he drew his axe and drew a whetstone across his axe blade once more, Naruto leaned against the gate, waiting for Kakashi. He had had a pleasant dinner with the librarian yesterday, discussing history, logic, jutsu, and a little bit about the meaning of life. He was interrupted when he noticed Team 8 approaching with their sensei. Their sensei spoke to him first, and he bowed to Hinata and her sensei, nodded to Shino, and ignored Kiba, annoying the dog boy. Hello, Uzumaki, I take it that you have been allowed to rejoin the ninja community? Shino waved, and Kiba started talking after he nodded to her and Hinata turned to play with her fingers. Hey clown, why are you attempting tracking with these new guys? We're all skilled trackers, so you don't have the talent for it. Naruto gave him a quick glance before turning back to his axe. Kiba stopped dead in his tracks, took notice, and cursed as he fixed his pants. Shino shook his head and walked over to Naruto. I have enough experience to know you marked territory before you came here. You leaked some on your pants, but that makes sense. After all, with your anger about that, it's understandable that you would forget your zipper. Uzumaki-san, I've heard that you're en route to your surrogate father's grave. Is this accurate? Is it also true that you met this man in prison and that you bonded with him there? Naruto asked, nodding as he pressed the stone against his axe once more. Kiba interrupted Naruto as he nodded. Wow, how did you all connect? Did you cuddle in the dark? Your father was actually an old man prison bitch. Kurenai scowled at her pupil and said, ha ha ha. But when his dog saw Naruto's reaction, it started to back away. Shino turned around and said, Kiba-san, I would run. Kiba laughed at him while the rest of the team turned to face Naruto. Naruto had stopped sharpening his axe and had the stone clenched in his hand, his fingers slowly crushing it, and he slammed his axe into the gate, making the whole thing tremble. Shino was clearly shaking from his exertion, and Kakashi wasn't much better. They were both being slowly dragged to Kiba's position, while Hinata and Kurenai stepped back. Kurenai raised her hands for a genjutsu, casting it but finding no effect. The blonde's rage boiling away the excess chakra she was trying to use. Kakashi made a single-handed gesture and switched Kiba with a log. Naruto slammed into it and punched it repeatedly, leaving imprints and splintering it until it snapped and turned to face Kiba. Kiba was shocked when he vanished and saw a log in his place. Take it back. As he flew once more, Kakashi slammed him down. Kiba watched as Naruto fought for his freedom, dragging Kakashi around. As Naruto fought harder and Shino attempted to help restrain him, Kakashi swore, What's wrong, Dobi? The truth brings back bad memories. Ha ha ha. Shino accidentally struck Kakashi in the side of the neck after Naruto threw him off. After that, Naruto lost control and threw Shino to the side, correcting himself before landing, after grabbing him in an overarm throw. When Ikatetsu and Izumo arrived to help Kakashi, Kiba leapt aside as Naruto smashed the ground. Kakashi put Naruto in a chokehold as he leapt once more after receiving the message. Izumo and Katetsu each grabbed an arm. Shino attempted to halt his progress. Kiba was still laughing at the blonde, but his laughter had subsided. As he brought the image of his master's body entombed in its shrine, Naruto could only hear the laughter in his mind. He detested that laughter, and he smothered it with his own. As he heard a roar in his mind, he persisted in fending off his captors, but his strength was insufficient. Kakashi uttered the words, Naruto, calm yourself, don't do this, think of your father, while gasping for air. When Katetsu and Izumo realized, they jumped in. Shino interrupted, saying, Yeah, it was all in fun, right Kiba? Not a problem, just joking around. As Kiba interrupted, Naruto started to cool down. Naruto-san, he is brash, but it would hurt our team if we were to have to wait for him to recover. He started laughing again and said, Yeah, everything is fine, Naruto. After all, you can always put on a dress and go find another random old guy from a prison. After flinching and flinging the chunin away, Naruto gut shot Kakashi, causing his hold to relax and flinging Shino into him. Naruto was now unrestricted and charged at Kiba, only to encounter a wall of green. When he slammed his hands into it, he discovered that even harder hands were there. He tried to push past it, but they gave him no leeway and pushed him back, surprising him because he was at a match when he heard no cries of pain. Kakashi looked up to witness his pupil facing off against the formidable beast Might Guy, his self-proclaimed arch-enemy. Kakashi sighed as he realized that Naruto was supposedly stopped for the time being. Hello Kakashi, I see you are training your student well in the way of taijutsu. He truly is an exceptional student in the way of force. He is actually quite a handful. You must get quite a good workout sparring with him, and I am relishing this little game of push immensely. If I were to beat him, would this be a victory? Guy grinned, pushed Naruto to an even match, and said, I have a better idea. Guy, if you could calm him down and stop him from pulping the genin behind you, I will let you train him some. Young ninja of the leaf, you have a burning flame of youth. Might I inquire to your name? The blonde huffed as she attempted to move the green wall, saying, N Naruto. Naruto nodded and exhaled deeply, pushing Guy back a step. Naruto, very youthful name. You remind me of my Lee, burning with so much youthfulness. I have heard that you have great love for your surrogate father. Is this true? Naruto asked. As Shino, and Hinata watched Naruto attempt to push the other genin away, Kurenai remarked, Well, young Naruto, if you were to attack him. His name is Kiba, Guy. Ah, thank you Kurenai. Naruto, if you were to attack Kiba, would you be honoring your mentor's teachings? Naruto sighed. Guy nodded gravely. I will when I turn him into a lump of broken bones. Naruto roared and pushed Guy back another step, asking, may I ask as to where this man is now, your father figure? Kakashi commented, he is dead. Guy, as he watched the display. Izumo and Katetsu hunkered down, prepared to grab Naruto if he got the drop on Guy. Yes. Guy said, nodding and pushing Naruto back a step. Ah, so you were trying to avenge his honor, since he no longer can? They were locked once more after Naruto applied more force. At this point, Naruto paused and a quote from his master's teachings came to him. Then youthful Naruto, let me ask this, if your father was here, at this exact moment would he be trying to use the way of force? Was he a violent man? My boy, whenever force is used, it always takes a bloody, destructive route with serious consequences. Take these words to heart. My son, peace will leave less destruction in its wake, and you will also feel more at ease and self-respect in the process. You, my son, must be a student of calmness with iron skin and great patience with this mindset. My teachings will make you truly unconquerable. Bravery is the enemy of the mind, and anger, when controlled, is a great weapon. Patience will create a just and great man, but only the savage method of war will genuinely leave a man alone in the world. Which will you be when the time comes? Naruto's breathing was slowing down and he was no longer pushing as hard, so Guy knew he had apparently reached the boy. He let go of the boy's hands after nodding. Naruto stepped back and exhaled deeply while placing his hand in a meditative position. Very good, my youthful Naruto, it will be an honor to train you when you return. Whatever those teachings your master gave you, keep them close to your heart. They were obviously of great importance to you, and if you go far enough you can pass them to your own students. Find me or my Lee when you wish to train in the way of taijutsu, and increase your significant force. Guy then walked to Kakashi and wished him luck on his journey, leaving the village with Naruto before being stopped by the beast's roar. Naruto turned and saw his axe spinning through the air in his direction. Youthful Naruto, do not forget this, he said. He grabbed the blade-wielding handle an inch from his jacket as he watched Kakashi duck. He dropped it into the loop on his belt. After spinning it around he gave a nod, and the two departed. Kiba continued to laugh as the Dobi departed, but the man who saved him grabbed him by the collar and lifted him up. Putting the boy on the ground, Guy said, young Inuzuka, Naruto loves his master like you care for your family or companion. I would not do whatever you did again. Not everyone will be here for you to stop him. He was pushing me back. At some points you should go train and think over your mistakes, as your sensei will most definitely want to speak with you. Guy was pleased to have given Lee and himself a sparring partner. Kurenai was stalking toward Kiba when he turned. The Hokage and his Anbu hesitated as the slap echoed through the village, and he then dispatched them to locate Jiraiya, his pupil. It was getting close to night outside the village. Naruto marched on, his feet advancing quickly through the pace he had established. Since he didn't know where they were going, Kakashi was a little behind him. He was certain of the mountain's location, but like the majority of the other ninja, he had no expressed interest in seeing it because it brought back too many memories of the leaf villages near destruction some 14 years prior. He remained silent for a while longer, hoping the blonde would strike up a conversation on his own. When he saw the blonde wasn't demanding to strike up a conversation, he was proactive. He took his Icha Nightfall from his pouch and said, so Naruto, now that we are alone, why don't we use this time to further our knowledge of each other? It could only benefit us for the future. Kakashi sighed, but Naruto remained silent. Naruto nodded, and Kakashi was dragged away from this. Well, I guess it was worth a shot. A tiny smile appeared beneath Kakashi's mask. What do you want to talk about, Naruto? My knowledge is at your disposal for the entirety of this trip, as when you return your new taijutsu sensei will train you till you drop. Naruto stopped to listen to Kakashi read his book. He also paused and turned to face the blonde. Sensei, why don't we talk about something that is a great weakness for me? Kakashi laughed. Naruto frowned and resumed his steps, asking, chakra control? Naruto scowled and coolly interrupted the stream of inquiries that urged him to share his thoughts and suggest changes, asking, how about your lack of survival instinct from that ridiculous fire trap you put me through? Naruto stopped dead in his tracks and turned to face his sensei in disbelief. How about your seemingly endless mental barrage of questions that keeps you up at night? He asked. Naruto, I know all about your search for your answers. I would say that in small doses it would help you, but at the same time it overwhelms you. Lord Hokage told me about your scars and the seals on your neck. Naruto's hand reached for his turtleneck. After giving the boy a quick glance, Kakashi carried on walking. Naruto caught up to him and nodded, saying, then how about I ask you a question and you ask me a question, till we are satisfied? It was my idea, so I'll go first. He put his book in his pouch. How is your current chakra control? The question caused Naruto to harumph. Kakashi nodded and gestured to the boy, saying, "It's abysmal for the amount of techniques I know, probably low chunin on my best day." "How is your father doing?" When Kakashi remained silent, Naruto turned to face him. "Pass." With a start, Naruto said, "How fair is that?" Kakashi shrugged, while Naruto glared at the elusive scarecrow once more. "My turn, what?" Ignoring the Junin's joy, Naruto scowled more and swore, saying, "You asked a question, I never specified how our answers had to be." "All right," said Kakashi with a smile and a hand to his chin, "I'd like to know what all the chakra control exercises are." "I know the leaf balancing exercise, and the water sense exercise." Kakashi nodded, trying to recall what he knew about the water sense exercise, as Naruto began to realize that the Cyclops was starting to hint at something. "That is the one where you take a bunch of ninja weapons and hang them from strings in a strong current of water, and you have to swim down the current at different speeds using your chakra to form a hyperware thin sheet of chakra around yourself. The slower you go, the easier it is to try and realize how thick the layer of chakra needs to be to both detect and protect oneself from the current. The faster you go, the harder it is to be aware of the current and keep up the chakra layer without overdoing the output and making it useless. It's an interesting exercise. I wonder how he discovered it." Kakashi glanced at Naruto and then at his sandal before asking, "Okay, Naruto, your turn. What size shoe do you wear?" He tilted his head sideways. Naruto smirked and said, "That's your question?" The blonde was smarter than he had assumed, which is a little unsettling, and that was yours. Kakashi cursed himself for letting himself get caught in such a clear word trap. 13.5 inches. Naruto gave Kakashi a tick mark after glancing at him and shrugging, "Your next question." As the child laughed and continued to walk down the street, Kakashi moaned, "Are you starting to regret taking this trip with me yet?" At Naruto's loft, 1.5 weeks later, it was obvious that Kakashi was tired. The blonde always worked shifts and never slept for long. He appeared to be a machine. Kakashi sighed as he thought back on the journey. He would never again volunteer to accompany the blonde. The blonde's questions were incessant, and he would only stop when one of them was asleep. He would finance missions just to avoid having to, and once he woke up to see him asking a crocodile why it was attempting to capture the blonde in its strong jaws while the blonde was drawing its head and making experimental observations about the damn things moving in the mud on its 4 legs. At the time, Kakashi vowed that the blonde was drawn to the reckless and dangerous approach of finding the answer rather than the questions. In addition to the crocodile, the following were excellent examples. Using the chakra control exercise he had learned earlier that day, the blonde hung from the side of the cliff to watch the hawks that were indigenous to the gorges of the Land of Fire. He made a note of the wingspan, drew a sketch of the nest, examined the feather coat of the sleeping hawk, and even pulled its wings open to see where they were. He produced a tape measure from one of the pouches and used it to measure the legs. He drew a rough illustration of the claws that comprised its feet, illustrating the impression that the legs would leave in soft loam in order to avoid upsetting the residents of the gorge. Kakashi had stopped him there when he had started to focus on the eggs, and the blonde pouted for an hour afterward. As an additional example, Naruto had gently pointed out that the monkeys attacking them were fire gorillas, which are exclusive and reclusive creatures native to the Land of Fire, much like hawks. Kakashi hid behind a tree, hoping the monkey wouldn't go crazy, while Naruto strolled around to lead ape, taking notes, while it ate a variety of fruits. After completing his notes, Naruto sat down to draw the enormous, happy gorilla. He called to get the big ape's attention after finishing his sketch, causing Kakashi to grow gray hairs and confusing the large number of apes present. The apes watched him with interest as he started to sign and converse with them, and Kakashi saw that Naruto's shadow clones were approaching from the opposite side of the clearing and carrying away its food. Naruto put his journal in a pouch and bowed low after they were done. Kakashi was about to follow him when he heard something squish as he took a step. The note that read, "Next time we exchange questions, don't pass," was signed with a Q, and he noticed that Naruto's clones had stacked all the food next to him. However, the ape followed the food trail at that point and used a large amount of its food to locate our favorite ninja sensei. It then threw everything within reach at Kakashi, who leapt and avoided the majority of the angry flying food items. As Naruto watched, he strangely imagined Kakashi wearing overalls, an accent, and a big red cap. As soon as the other gorillas discovered him, they quickly fled, giving him more practice dodging. Another example was when Naruto spent the most time sitting on a rock, hardly moving, and writing notes with his hand off to the side. Curious, Kakashi had approached to look around, only to discover a pit full of snow bears dozing beneath him. Captivated by the scene, Kakashi simply stood by his pupil while he studied and drew the bears. Then, In order to leave the bears alone, they quietly departed. When they arrived at the shrine and paid their respects, he felt the blonde's level of respect had greatly increased. Then they started to return, unfortunately, hopefully with less risk. No success on the way back. Naruto collected samples of stone, ore, plants, fur, scales, antlers, and a tooth from a furious tiger that pursued them halfway home. Naruto had spent the trip there making observations after all of that, including the attacks, accusations, poisonous plants, enraged bats, and stressful situations. Kakashi finally came to two realizations. First, he would never again be upset about eliminating a group of bandits as opposed to furious animals, and second, Naruto was far more intelligent than he had first thought. He only learned to sketch and draw in order to have visuals to accompany his observations and notes. He turned to face the blonde, who was beaming since seeing him come back. He had hardly seen the blonde genuinely smile. He realized during his trip that he could only be himself when he was genuinely free from prejudice and rage. When asked about this, he responded that, in spite of his dreadfully bad tendency to keep putting questions into his skin, his father had taught him to be happy and content with himself. He had made it a habit to take soapstone and brush away the terrified tissue so he could ask new questions, but he could not bring himself to stop when Kakashi examined the boy for training. He pondered how Guy would react to this. He talked to the blonde and put this away for later reflection. Naruto nodded to his sensei before entering his house. I am happy that you let me accompany you, and I want to thank you. I don't know when was the last time I looked at nature and didn't see it as a way to further myself. Thank you. Don't forget to meet at the training ground tomorrow, he said, dismissing a feeble response. Naruto removed his boots and leaned against his doorstop. On the coat stand, he placed his jacket. The numerous items that filled the pouches were removed from his belt, which was resting on his side table. He sealed all of his samples in scrolls for that particular item and placed his journal in the bookcase. He completed the belt and replaced the shuriken, scroll, and other necessary items. He moved aside and placed his dagger underneath his axe on a wall rack. After taking off his turtleneck, he performed a relaxed handstand before starting one-armed lifts. The sun peeking over the horizon went unnoticed by him. What mattered was that he was at home and at ease. At the training ground the following day, Naruto adhered to the map sketch that Kakashi had provided him. Naruto had no earthly clue as to how he used it. After 6 hours of practical chakra exercises, while Sakura practiced genjutsu and physical exercises, and Sasuke performed a few fireballs and danced around performing something that vaguely resembled taijutsu, he was certainly absorbed in it, even though it didn't seem to be of any use. I don't care. I might as well just leave him alone. Naruto saw the man who had stopped him when he turned a tree and came to a stop. Oh my god, what the devil is that? Doesn't stop. It burns. He was drilling what could only be a very brief shadow clone, but waited, their voices were different. Wondering what could possibly be right in this situation, Naruto dropped to his knees and gazed up at the sky. It doesn't get any better. Naruto turned to see a girl sitting and sharpening a shuriken in a Chinese-style shirt with buns, and a boy in robes standing next to her, his arms crossed and his head shaking. Naruto drew himself over to them and examined the two. Did they halt? When they finally stopped and turned to face them, the girl sighed and the boy shook his head. Naruto froze, thinking, oh my god, they won't do that to us, are they? Naruto watched as they drew closer, both of them shaking their heads and breathing easily. Guy turned to Naruto, who looked at him bewildered, and said, Ah, Naruto-san, I am guessing you are here to further your training in taijutsu? Naruto then turned to him before introducing his team. The boy nodded enthusiastically and then threw his fist in the air, saying, Ah yes, forgive me. This is my youthful proto copyright Ga copyright Rock Lee. Naruto turned to face him. Then we have our weapon user, the youthful Tenten, and our last member, the veritable genius of the Hyuga clan's taijutsu, youthful Hyuga Negi. You belong to the Hyuga clan, right? Negi nodded, and Naruto stood and bowed before turning to face Guy, who was performing push-ups at an absurdly rapid pace. Negi nodded and left. Guy nodded, grinning broadly, and handed Naruto a scroll from his pouch, saying, This is my regiment for your training. Based on everything Kakashi told me, this is all you need for now. I was told if I wanted to perfect my taijutsu, you were the one to speak with. Uncertain of how to interpret this sudden event, Naruto nodded and took the scroll before heading out. After 3 days sitting in his loft, Naruto relished the overall warmth. Sunlight streaming in through the windows warmed the wooden floors, filling the loft with the aroma of spicewood. The curved staircase leading to his bedroom caught his attention. He glanced at the letter next to him once more as the light cast lovely shafts through the atmosphere. To Uzumaki, Hinata-sama sincerely apologizes for having to call off your dinner reservation. We have learned that you paid for your own dinner, and we have sent a sum that we believe is fair given your time and effort since her team just left for a C-rank mission for the village. Hinata-sama offers her condolences once more, our condolences once more. The proud retainer of the Hyuga clan and steward of Hinata is Hiwaimi Hyuga. Naruto noticed a big roll of bills inside the envelope. His master had left him a coin to pay for his dinner, and it had only taken half of that amount, he sneered. Taking the note to his side table under the window, he nodded. His mementos from the Hyuga heiress were in a drawer he opened, and inside were the pictures, the necklace he wore under his long-necked sweater, the flower, and the double-set flute that was resting in a carved holder on top of the cabinet. He picked up his pack and went by the door after dropping the letter in. He checked his weapons and equipment again. Today was the first time he and his team received a C rank outside of the village. They were heading farther east than he had ever been to the land of waves. It was bound to be hazardous and dangerous. Naruto chuckled quietly. He would never be able to shout or talk loudly without experiencing excruciating pain because his voice had never fully recovered. He smiled and swung his bag to his back before leaving his house and locking it behind him. What the hell? Sounds like a challenge.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.